You have two eyes, huh? Do you understand the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign?
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
Fine. Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
A very affectionate greeting to everybody out there in internet land on this Sunday evening. It is the national curriculum back once again. And, well, if correlation is causation, as it were, and availability is indeed the best ability, the two most able reporters, able panelists are indeed on the show tonight. Josh Parrish joining myself, Joey Lynch, for another bumper edition of the National Curriculum. Josh, great to have you back on the show. How have you been?
Well, tonight, Joey, I'm despairing for the future of Australian soccer podcasting, to be honest, because if availability is the best ability, I'm not sure we've got the cattle. You know, this like what more could we expect? You know, we're 4 minutes late. There's two of us, but we're relying on listener interaction tonight. Tonight's show is all about the audience, I think. So keep those questions and those comments coming through on Twitter, and especially on the ESPN YouTube. That's the easiest place for us to see them and display them on the stream live as we're going along. But yeah, we're leaning on the audience tonight because certain members of the TNC crew. Little bit lacking in the ability department.
Well, I mean, perhaps it's a case of they made their beds and they did decide to sleep in them, and they're so comfortable. They've slept right through this week's edition of TNC. Yes, we should say before we go further into detail, Nick DeBarno will be joining us a little bit later. He's had some AFL duty tonight, so hopefully this duo can become a trio at some point soon. But until then, we will forge ahead, Josh and I. I mean, we've had the Mega Powers edition of myself and Ante. We had the two-man power trip of myself and Nick Stoll very briefly last week. So you can drop us in a comment, what tag team should myself and Josh be named after? I suggested in the chat, Rated Arcade Joe was met with absolute no sells. So we'll see what we can come across. Yes, yeah.
I get the sound of the reference whooshing over my head.
Yes, I am not joined by one of the TNC's wrestling aficionado. What would be our in-joke, Josh? Do we have any obscure NPL references? Would that be our in-joke?
Yeah, probably that is outrageous. Yes. Get around him.
There's your sliding. And all of those other things. No, but big show today. We're going to talk about the Socceroos, both looking at the World Cup from a squad composition standpoint, and some of the squad members that would ostensibly be nailed on, some of the squad members that would be wanting to mount a case are still homeless. So we'll talk about that. One's apparently on holiday in Sydney. So we'll look at that. We've got we still don't know what to call this team. They're not the mini Matildas. They're not the junior Matildas. They're not the young Matildas. We don't have an Ollie Roos equivalent name for the Matildas under 23s. We're going to talk about them and their exploits in the AFF tournament. However, if you can come up with a name that we can call them rather than just boring old Matildas under 23s, be sure to drop a comment. Marquees are coming, sugar hits, there's non-marquee dealings. Man United, Josh Parrish, the biggest club in the world, at least by fanboys. They are coming to Australia. We're going to talk about that.
The greatest club in the world. Not like a wee club in the northeast.
We're going to talk about that's awful accent.
I was trying to do Sir Alex. It's a tough one. It's a tough impression.
It's
give me
a
a spell.
I'll forgive you that one. We're going to do Media Watch, Lower League Watch, and of course, as Josh Parrish said, we are going to get to your questions. So never doubt us. No football whatsoever aside from the under 23 Matildas. We're going to go 2 hours anyway because that's just what we do. That's just our brands.
Depth of the off-season, baby. This is the most off-season episode, and that's what we love. Actually, these are the most fun ones, to be honest. Which we're just talking absolute nonsense for 2 hours. TNC going. Well, I was going to say worldwide, but going viral at Lakeside. in fact.
Yes, I do. Thanks to Skip Fulton, friend of the show, for giving us an ad on the Lakeside Stadium LED board. Well, no, big scoreboard.
Yeah, giant jumbotron.
Yeah. Well, it was featuring some guy from Sydney. We did have a few suggestions for who is that random guy from Sydney? I think one comment just came through, Arnie. No, Graham Arnold isn't our one guy in Sydney, although Arnie, if you are watching.
What a twist if Arnie was the new co-host of the podcast.
It would be something.
That would shake up the formula. Maybe he'd make us millionaires.
Open invite to Graham Arnold to come on the podcast and host. We debate the best host on the podcast. Could it be Graham Arnold is the best podcast best podcast host, and we just don't know it yet? That could be something very interesting. But enough stalling. We can get to the first topic because it does involve Graham Arnold. Now, this news came out a few weeks ago, but we haven't actually touched on it on the national curriculum. That the announcement that FIFA, that squads for this World Cup, they're going to be expanded. Traditionally, you bring a 23-player squad to the World Cup. It will be 26 players at this coming World Cup. 3 more golden tickets, 3 more tickets on the plane to Qatar for the Socceroos. I mean, it's going to be exciting, Josh, for if you are a player on the fringes of that national team, a bit more if you're somebody like maybe a Marco Tilio or someone like that on the fringes, bit more maybe room for error, so to speak, at the start of the A-League season. If you're somebody on the outside looking in, maybe a Jamie Cummings, all of a sudden that avenue in gets a bit wider. I mean, how do you think Graham Arnold's will be looking at these extra 3 slots? Is he just going to bring the best 3 players? Do you think he addresses a certain position? What are you thinking on that front?
I want to know who Jamie Cummings is. That's what I want to know.
It's because him and Jamie McLaren are so
they're so similar,
you know.
I think it's an interesting one, not just because it expands the opportunity, but also it changes the kind of player you might be able to select. You might be able to take a flyer on someone who would otherwise be too much of a risk because you needed reliable cover in every position. Because you think 23-man squad, that's 3 goalkeepers plus 2 players for every position. That's basically the formula. You know, you can tweak it slightly, maybe 1 less centre back, 1 extra midfielder, or 1 less striker, or whatever. But that's your essential formula there. Whereas for those 3, I guess, wild card spots, and there's no obligation to bring a 4th goalkeeper, thankfully, although there was speculation to that regard for a little while, which would be bonkers. But I think it increases the chances for a coach, not necessarily Arnold, but for any coach at this tournament to take a flyer on an impact player who you otherwise wouldn't necessarily rely on for, a 90-minute performance in case of suspension or injury. And, who's the best player for 10 minutes off the bench to change a game? And keep coming back to 2018 Redux, baby. Arzani, get him in there.
It probably would help if you found the club first, I imagine. But
probably.
I'm going to pick up something very interesting what you said, Josh. You said not particularly Arnie. Do you think Arnie will subscribe to that school of thought? Because we know going into this squad, you talk about the limited, normally it's just a couple of players at each position, and that's sort of what you bring. Looking at this squad, we're looking at it, and I'm thinking somebody like Harry Souttar coming off an ACL injury. Do you think that's an opportunity? Maybe Graham Arnold looks at that and says, I'm going to bring an extra centre-back just because I want to start Harry Souttar because he's my guy, which it's pretty obvious that Harry Souttar has become one of the first names on Graham Arnold's team sheet. Does he look at that and say, I'm going to sacrifice maybe some game-breaking ability because I've got Souttar, I'm definitely bringing him, but now I've got a bit of extra room to cover him. That's what I'm thinking, because we look at Graham Arnold's tenure as a Socceroos coach, particularly when going up against strong opposition, and he's not going to come up any stronger opposition throughout his entire tenure than what he's going to do here at the World Cup in the form of France especially, as well as Denmark and the Tunisians. which I don't think we can sleep on the Tunisians, by the way, just because they don't carry the same NRI as...
They're going to be crestfallen still after last night's Wimbledon final loss, so I think we can count them out now. Ange Jabeur, they put so much stock in her, and it's a gut wrencher, that one.
Stats performs Josh Parrish, everybody. He watches other sports now, so he can drop all these references. But yeah, looking at that, I sort of see in that scenario, he'll look at these 3 extra chances, and it's an opportunity to maybe reinforce further back, lest the game changes, as it were. Where will I plug holes in the defense? Where will who can play? Do I bring another deep lying midfielder in case Aaron Mooy breaks down? So that's sort of where I could possibly see the avenue. I think your version is completely valid, and I think it's another course of action that Graham Arnold could absolutely take. Probably not with Daniel Arzani unless a miracle occur in the coming months, which.
But someone in the Arzani mold, perhaps.
Yeah, in the Arzani mold.
We've got a few comments in that regard, but I like the other interpretation of it, which is taking a risk on a first-team player that might have a checkered injury record or not such a great run of first-team games in the lead-up to the tournament for whatever reason, be it Massimo Luongo maybe, who's been frozen out, or Aaron Mooy, who doesn't have a club, or Harry Souttar, as you say, coming off a serious injury, and then using that extra spot for an extra backup for that particular position, lest they break down. That's, I guess, another way. It's sort of the reverse way to think about it.
Well, looking at the squad, Josh Parrish, looking at the positions, I know you mentioned Massimo Luongo there. At the same time, now, without trying to, order them in terms of talent, Massimo Luongo versus the others, I feel as though certainly Graham Arnold especially would believe that we've got a lot of depth in the central midfield position. I mean, he played Connor Metcalfe during this qualifying campaign. He left him out of the playoff squad, so you got players like that. I feel as though if we're looking at this squad, where do you see the actual positions that could use extra bodies in them? Because I reckon it sounds a bit weird, but centre back could be one with the injury concerns that we will have coming in. I mean, we look at our number 9 stocks, and we're throwing bodies in there throughout the process. Is that an area where you now bring an extra body to just, see, all right, doesn't work with Mitch Duke or Jamie McLaren, but now I've got this extra slot, I can bring in another number 9, all of that sort of thing. And I think another thing that's going to be very interesting is, does this provide another lifeline for Tom Rogic? Because we were talking, we'll get to Tom Rogic's club future in a bit, but we were talking in the aftermath of the Peru game that it's going to be incredibly difficult to break into that side that beat Peru, because Arnie's going to want to dance with the people that brought him. Now there's the scope for Arnie to bring back Rogic without having to sacrifice one of the players that actually went to the Middle East and secured qualification. So that could be something very interesting, I think, to watch in the future. And I think we should also point out that it is just you and I, Josh, talking, but a very affectionate greeting from Germany, from Nick Stoll.
Oh, guten Tag.
Guten Tag. Hello, Nick Stoll. The link is in the chat, Nick Stoll, so you can feel free to jump on for a quick cameo at any point if you want.
In terms of spots that need strengthening, or in terms of the Rogic question, I think it all depends on the circumstances of his departure or non-appearance at that camp, which we still haven't got to the bottom of, as far as I know. The only thing I've heard was it's a sort of personal thing or a family thing, and it was a delicate situation. That's about as much intel as we collectively have on it, I think, Joey. So you wouldn't have thought that Graham Arnold would have any hard feelings towards Tom Rogic for turning down that call-up, if it is indeed that kind of issue. So if there is no, personal disharmony or split between the two of them that would lead Graham Arnold to leaving him out, surely, Rogic is in the frame here. I think he, regardless of what he does over the next 6 months, you just don't have another player like him.
Well, some suggestions. Benjamin Smith in the YouTube comments, an extra 3 spots allows Arnie to reserve a seat on the plane for Bradley Stubbs. I'm assuming that's Bradley C. Stubbs. Expect to win dun, who is feuding with Eddie Jones, the England rugby team coach, Josh Barrett, which was interesting, claiming that his sides forgot how to win once he got rid of Jones, at which point Jones responded that he'd never heard of the coach whisperer in his life. So that's a really interesting one.
Who are you? Essentially.
But on the flip side, we've talked about Arnie's view of these extra slots, Josh, but do you feel like it is now going to be like that extra carrot for players heading into the season, that there is the 3 slots and it's a bit more, a World Cup. There's more room for hope, I should say, because players should never be lacking motivation to perform when there's a World Cup on the horizon. But do you feel like there's more scope for hope now?
I think so, but if you haven't been in the frame before, if you haven't even made a camp before, it's a bit of a long shot to force your way in now. For someone like Jason Cummings, for example, or Jamie Cummings, as we're now calling him, I guess there's more hope there. Drive him on for this the next part of the A-League season when it restarts and so forth. And, Arnold has said he's going to have a look at him. He's going to look at everyone. He's paid at lip service anyway. But if you haven't had a look in before and you're not one of those sort of X-factor players who's going to garner all the headlines over the course of the next few months and do something incredible and have media clamoring for your inclusion, say you're a right back or something, or a left back. Say you're Ben Gariccio. Let's say, pull one out of an example out of the ether. Don't think someone like he would be rating his chances that highly, despite his great form for Western United, because he's just been ignored. And even when there were absences in the squad, it was Jason Davidson who got the call up. So for those sorts of players, and you're only likely to bring 2 players per position in those areas, I don't think there's a great carrot for these 3 extra spots necessarily. But for game-changing players, or players in positions where Australia has had absences and issues like centre-back, it's definitely an extra carrot.
What you bring up there is interesting, Josh, in the sense of game changer. And I think that could be something to watch in the opening weeks of the A-League men's season. Arnie, in a recent interview, talked about potentially with midweek fixtures getting around 8 rounds of the A-League men's season in before it breaks for the World Cup. And he names his final squad. And heading into that one, we have done to death on this podcast the aversion to risk, so to speak, that a lot of teams and a lot of players show in that competition. It will be interesting to see whether or not that dynamic changes in the lead into the World Cup, as we see players potentially try to demonstrate that they are a game breaker, so to speak, rather than just turnarounds and play the ball in a U shape. There is that appetite to take a player on because you need to start generating headlines and you need to start demonstrating that you bring an X factor if you are to secure an unlikely call up to the World Cup squad. Because, well, to go back to the bolter TM of the 2018 World Cup cycle, it was Daniel Arzani. How did Daniel Arzani do it? It was taking on his man, beating defenders, being a lightning bolt. He certainly wasn't playing 90 minutes week in and week out and doing all the basics right. Warren Joyce bloody hated that he wasn't doing that. But what he was able to do was he was able to show that he brought something that other players couldn't, and he generated that media push to get him in the squad, which probably in the long run has hurt him in the eyes of the Australian public, because there was a backlash and a reaction to that, even though I think we're all Arzani truthers on this show and we still think that he's a good player and he's just really unfortunate circumstances. But that's going to be something to watch moving forward. We do have some suggestions for players to come through, potential bolters. Alan Riley has left a comment. Would like to see Strain get a spot if he does well at St. Mirren. I mean, if he does well, potentially, but he'd have to really do well to break through, you'd think.
I mean, it's St. Mirren. I don't want to be disrespectful, but also it's St. Mirren. There are teams in Scotland and there are teams in Scotland, and from the limited amount I've seen of them, I wouldn't really put them amongst the upper echelon of clubs. There are a couple of suggestions for, Garang Kwol, and asking if I was campaigning for Nestor Irankunda, given saying who's the best player in 5 or 10 minutes, and that's that's Irankunda to a T. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility if they did something spectacular, but probably not. Garang Kwol didn't even make the Youth Asian Championship squad, so he's not going to make the senior team. But maybe his brother might be in a better spot to make a push for that if he started the season well. I don't know if he's been loaned out yet, but I think he's still with training with the first team at Stuttgart, and scoring in friendlies and things like that. If he made a push and playing at a high level in Germany, he could be in the frame.
We got a lot of love for the Cumdog as well. A few comments supporting the inclusion of Cummings. And I think if there is any player that will get sort of like a combination of fan and media circulating around them to bolster their push for selection in this World Cup squad, it will be Cummings. I feel as though he's got the combination of game-breaking ability. He's got the talent. He's probably, at this stage, from what he's shown since he arrived in Australia, if he can keep that up, he's got the talent. But also, in terms of when you are trying to fashion narratives, he's got the meme ability surrounding bolters as well. Like, he does the celebration and all of that sort of stuff. So I think he's a real possibility. I did want to come back to one, though, from Tom. Stensness. And I do think that we've seen Arnie went out of his way to recruit Gianni Stensness for the Socceroos because he was playing with New Zealand's under-23s. Arnie went out and recruited him. Apparently they live really close to each other on the Central Coast or in North Sydney. I think they share an agent as well. So I think, and we did talk about the risk aversion. That could be the type of player that, young player that I really could see taking one of these spaces when I went on my little talk about what sort of figure Arnie could potentially bring in. So it's going to be very interesting to see, of course. Well, I mean, Arnie's in Melbourne tomorrow, so I'm going to ask him these questions as well, and I can report back on that. But always fun to pontificate on these sort of things. So, but
are you going to ask him in person, or are you going to post the question to him with one of those new stamps that he's launching?
No, I'm going to I'm going to go down and pose the question in person because, I mean, we're going to get to Media Watch in a minute, but I raised as I was by an old school journalist, I feel it's very important to the craft that if you're going to take shots, if you're going to critique somebody's performances, when they succeed, you've got to go down and take your lumps. So I'm going to go down, and if he wants to give me a clip around the ear roll, I'll take it because that's what being a journalist is. You got to take that stuff, and I'll respond in kind, and we can have a conversation because we're all adults here. And unlike,
craft. This is a great one.
Yes. No,
we're not all adults.
we are all adults. Here we go. Here's I can't see the initial comment, but I do want to actually get to this because it is a good one. Rene Piscopo. Is he a potential bolter?
Very possibly. He's gone to Newey. They could potentially be playing some exciting
box office Jets.
Yes, indeed. They could be potentially playing some exciting football to start the season. We hope. And he's been a figure in the Roos under Arnie as well. So Arnie knows him. So that's the point in the plus category. And I think those sorts of players, I mean, he's got a bit more first-team experience than the guys we've been talking about in those wide positions. I don't think those positions are totally settled. Like, I think Boyle will start in Qatar, but Mobile maybe won't. Depending on how he goes at Cardiff, and there's a question that other spot. I mean, he didn't. Lecky is another option, of course. So
Goodwin, goals and assists, Josh. Goals and assists.
Yeah, of course. How can
Your
I forget
player of the season?
My boy, Craig Goodwin. It remains to be seen who starts in the other wing position. So I think that's one of the less settled spots in the Socceroos starting lineup, and therefore the extended squad is a little bit more up in the air.
And I've found the apparent comment, so we'll get to this one before we move on to discussing some other players. But Alan Riley, other ideas for bolters. We've talked about Piscopo. Miller, I'm assuming that's Lewis Miller, Cam Devlin, and maybe even Kusini Yengi. Now, Yengi, I think, could be an interesting one. For whatever reason, Devlin just hasn't been called up. Not sure why. I mean, he was with Arnie. Was he with Arnie at Sydney FC? He was at Sydney FC in the academy. Was that purely when Corica was there, or?
Good. That requires me to do maths, Joey, and that's never a good. That's never a good idea.
Well, he probably would have been coming up through the academy when Arnie was there, even if he wasn't pushing for first team.
2016. Yeah, they probably overlapped. Yeah, I think they did. What did they? In fact. Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Miller would be a better chance than Strain, just because he's going to be playing at Hibs instead of St Mirren. I'm really dunking on St Mirren tonight. Devlin,
do we have any St Mirren fans in the comments? Right in.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to anger those people, but Cam Devlin, we've spoken about him on the show before. I think he's a big talent. Again, those midfield positions are so competitive, but I'm a big fan, and I think he can cover the flaws of some of the players around him who might be more defensively turnstiles, let's say, not naming any names.
I have a terrible feeling that Devlin's addition would come at the sacrifice of Dennis Genre.
Yeah, that's very possible. Whereas I think those two players complement each other extremely well, but that might be the midfield combination for the next World Cup cycle. Yengi, again, if a striker makes a good impression, every chance of getting in the squad. But going to the Western Sydney Wanderers does not seem to be a good path to the Socceroos at the moment.
Okay, before we move on to our next topic, Nick Stoll's complaining in the chat that I'm not responding to the comments. So Nick Stoll leaving a comment complaining about how we're ignoring all these great comments, how it's shameful hosting. And then he's leaving a comment about Mike Oxmeltz can make the step up. Don't know, mate.
We're berseriously not all adults on this podcast, as I said before.
Yeah, that's why
there was a comment before saying that he was tuning in live from the Berghain, and it's midday in Germany. So if he is, he's had quite an evening.
Freya would never let him go out clubbing all night. No,
we know who runs that household. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on, looking at maybe some of the more intriguing potential players for this World Cup, some homeless players. Aaron Mooy. I mean, last I checked, still doesn't have a club. Melbourne City fans keep trying to link him with a return to the A-League men. His agent is out there speaking to press, talking about how he's got offers from various leagues around the world. Celtic, apparently, could be on the cards, which would be interesting because if I'm correct in my thinking, because I believe Milos Degenek was at Yokohama before Ange arrived, he would become the first Australian player signed by Ange since he left the Socceroos post. So that could be an interesting one. So before we get to Rogic, Luongo, et al., Aaron Mooy. Now, Josh, I think we've talked on this show that he's probably on the plane regardless of what happens with his club form. With a player like Aaron Mooy, this isn't us saying it's the right thing. It's just looking at reality. With a player like Aaron Mooy, ostensibly his priorities for his coming move would be finding the right fit, game time. Where do you think Aaron Mooy should be looking? Can he get away with a return to the A-League men competition. I mean, albeit it wouldn't really be a return home, given that his entire family lives in Scotland. To return home at this point is probably Scotland for him. But where do you see Aaron Mooy's best move in whilst he is a free agent?
Well, I think he can definitely get away with a return to the A-League. I mean, where has he been playing in the meantime while he's continued to represent the Socceroos? Nowhere. You know, he's been training with Hibs, was it? You know, he's had not played at all, basically, for Shanghai Port for various reasons. I keep seeing the, you know, reposted Aaron Mooy returns to, you know, signs for Melbourne City A-League memes thing. You know, and I'm expecting one day that link will pop up and it won't be a hoax. I really do think he's a chance to come back. But in terms of where he ends up, I mean, Celtic could be a good fit to kind of manage, because they've got lots of players in that position. He could pick and choose his moments and be rotated around a little bit and wouldn't necessarily have heavy minutes going straight back in. I think you have to manage his return to regular football a little bit. But, you know, then you're replacing Rogic with Mooy, which is really interesting. I guess they cannot coexist if that's the case. One leaves, one arrives. Finally, our Gerrard Lampard conundrum is proved correct. Yeah. As for where he ends up, I honestly think he could play. This guy has proved himself to be undroppable in Graham Arnold's eyes, because if you can play for the Socceroos when you literally don't have a club, then surely the A-League is not that much of a downgrade on unemployment.
Well, interesting about Melbourne City, because, I mean, you're looking at it, just before we came on air, certain move happened. Unless you're a Melbourne City fan, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Ruston Griffiths moved to Mumbai City from Melbourne City. Now, why would Melbourne City do that? Ruston Griffiths was obviously a popular member of that dressing room. He started in the grand final. Why would Melbourne City get rid of athletically limited holding midfielder? What are they making room for?
What's going on in Casey?
What's going on at Casey Fields? I'm kidding. If he does sign for City after this, we're clipping that and I'm going viral. No, we've got Aaron. You are right in the sense that it really doesn't matter where he goes because he's going to get picked. But I guess for him, it's also about. Also, it's going to be interesting. What are his priorities? Is this a short-term move for just get me some minutes before the World Cup, and then I'll reassess afterwards? Does he make another secure the bag move? In which case, maybe that opens up the Middle East or somewhere like that. Again, so that'll be interesting. But
you know what I would love to see?
What?
Back to Huddersfield.
Huddersfield. Well, they did drop some really good away kits I saw recently, like all black away kits, which look rather sharp. But
well, I mean, they're a promotion-seeking championship team. I think that's probably his level at the moment. He's definitely not. It might be ambitious.
He's not Premier League level anymore.
He's not at the moment. They made the playoff final, of course, losing to the mighty Forest. I would love to see him go back there. I think it would be a nice story. And I think, that's one suggestion that comes off the top of my head. That's not based on any information, but I don't know if the hustle and bustle of the championship is beyond him at this point in his career. It could be.
Would that rule out Scotland as well? Getting the shit kicked out of him in the Scottish Premier League as well? Scottish Premiership, sorry. It's not the Premier League, it's the Premiership.
Yeah, it's the cinch, baby. Come on, get it right. I'm
an electricity fan, the Irish top flight.
It's sort of like that, but it depends which team you play for. If you're playing for, I keep coming back to them. If you're playing for St Mirren, it is absolutely bang crash wallop stuff. If you're playing for Celtic, in most of their games, they've got the ball a lot, and they dictate the game on their own terms.
But at a breakneck speed.
Yes, Yes, at times. But sometimes they need a little bit of a more considered approach in midfield. And that's where Rogic was very useful as someone who could pick a pass through a tight defence and come up with a little bit of quality in the final third against a team that was sitting back. And maybe Mooy can come up with something like that, drifting out into half space and providing the right cross. He's got that kind of quality. So in a bit part role, if that's the priority for him, then he could be useful for Celtic. But I think a return to the A-League would suit him just fine if it's a short-term move to get to the World Cup.
Comment coming in from Nick Stoll. Mooy needs to go to Scotland. Aberdeen would suit him, and Phil McCracken would make an incredible duo in the centre of the park. I'm not sure why Nick Stoll is under the impression that a 93-year-old American visual artist who specialises in sculpture is playing in the midfield for Aberdeen, but that just shows the amount of football that Nick Stoll watches. So he's really telling on himself, unfortunately, in these comments. Nick Stoll, please be better while you're over there in the footballing heartland of Europe. A more interesting comment, a much better comment than Nick Stoll's. Toros, Mooy to the MLS. It would be an intriguing...
It's just MLS, Joey. No definite article there. It's not the Major League Soccer, pedantry corner, but...
right.
We could do a Men in Blazers and call it an MLS, as they always do.
Mooy to an MLS. Well, it would be an interesting fit in the sense that it would be a secure the bag move, but it wouldn't be a secure the bag move that would come with, I guess, the cultural issues of a Middle East or a China. Like the China move that he had, his family stayed in Scotland while he was living in China. And that was apparently like a real, something, as you would expect, was a real challenge for him, having his family in Scotland. One would imagine that if he signs a high-price contract in the MLS, now we don't have any information, there might be none on offer. This is just us all spitballing. But it wouldn't be that more difficult to get his family out to the United States, even if it's not to live, just to visit. I mean, you can just jump across the Atlantic. It's a lot more simple than jumping to China or somewhere like that. So that would be a really interesting move, I think, for Aaron Mooy. The level wouldn't be above him as well. I think, we talk about it. It's basically like the A-Liga, just with different players and different teams. So he could potentially play really well in the MLS, couldn't he?
Well, I mean, there have been many, aging superstars who've gone there and done the job. I mean, you think of, actually, you know what? Wayne Rooney, midfield Wayne Rooney, in his latter era, is not a terrible comp to Aaron Mooy. You can launch a pass 40 meters onto somebody's chest. I'm not expecting Mooy to do the kind of dog work that Rooney did on that one DC United highlight that gets played over and over again with the open goal, and he goes back and... I'm not expecting anything like that, but yeah, I mean, sure. But do you want to be in America right now? I wouldn't. That's just me.
I've been in a blue state.
Okay.
But yeah, I think my T-shirt says more than I ever could about my views on other certain parts of United States on that front.
I think you might be putting a target on your front there, Joey, if you went to the States, to be honest.
Anyway, another player without a home, an intriguing one. We've touched on him briefly, Tom Rogic, who is apparently right now in Sydney. So who knows? Maybe he's tuning into the national curriculum. If you are, Tom, send us a DM. We'll send you a link and you can jump on. But Tom Rogic, now, he's another one that is intriguing. Why is he back here? Is he just back here because of the personal issues? Is a move to the A-League men on the offing? And we talked about how the move from 23 to 26 might extend scope for him, Josh, but even if that was the case, do you think he needs to be playing in a better league than the A-League men if he is to convince Arnie to take him, given that Arnie qualified without him to make it to the World Cup?
I don't know if he has to. I think that's a double standard for other players that are getting selected. I always assumed when Rogic left Celtic, and this is just my read on it, I assumed he would end up in the Middle East, and all power to him. a la Martin Boyle. That hasn't happened yet. And,
the news has come out that he turned down a high-price move to Indonesia.
Yeah, well, maybe certain, FIFA Pro guidelines about countries that you shouldn't move to is played on his mind a little bit. You shared that the other day, Joey, about certain contracts not being honoured in certain parts of the world, and the Global Players Union kicking up a stink, understandably so. He's in Sydney. Given that they missed out on Pena, given that they've lost Ninkovic, Sydney FC should be throwing all the money they have in his direction, but I don't know if he'd be tempted by that.
Well, on the subject of money, we're going to introduce Nick DeBarno in a second, and I'm going to throw one of the comments that was left here in the chat at him when we do add him. But before we bring him onto the stream, Josh, you mentioned money there, and I think it's intriguing that Tom Rogic and Aaron Mooy, in your mind, do they qualify as sugar hits worthy of APL funding as part of their contracts? Now, we're going to talk about Nani and Cesc Fabregas, who are seemingly imminent for the A-League men, and it looks like their contracts are going to be at least partially funded by the APL. Do Rogic and Aaron Mooy have the juice to get that special treatment, in your opinion?
Well, Devek has said time for an SOS to the APL for a temporary one-year A-Liga franchise license to home the homeless Socceroos ahead of the World Cup, just to create a dream team out of all the uncontracted Australian internationals, which we almost could have at this point. Rogic and Mooy, I think they are recognisable enough names. They're probably the only two names in the Socceroos that could command that. And funnily enough, they're two players without a club, but just in terms of NRI, I think they are up there. And
I think my problem with them, though, is when I'm thinking about these sugar hit marquees, they're not just footballers. They're brands. They're attractions, so to speak. That comes with certain media commitments. And I'm not sure, especially heading into a World Cup where they'll be ostensibly focusing on their performances. Neither of them have been the strongest media performers throughout their career. Like, would they does their play alone without that added media component justify the unfair advantage? Well, it is an unfair advantage if a team signs one of these players and the APL is paying part of their wages and another team doesn't have one. Does their play alone justify the unfair advantage of bringing them into Australia?
I don't really know how much the personality thing affects it, to be honest. I think it's the highlights that you want. You want the highlights to be able to clip up and post all over social. The interviews and the Instagram stories are just, little sprinklings on top. I mean,
you want them on the project.
Yeah, you do. But
that's one of the reasons
Daniel Sturridge was great on the project. Well, but Daniel Sturridge was great on the project.
Once, and then he never did any media after that.
Yeah, because he wasn't playing because he was injured and he didn't want to talk about it, which is fair enough.
So he should have been doing more. No, it's not fair enough.
I mean, but like the tough questions about how's your body, when are you going to see the pitch again? They just
because he's going to be given like the tough questions on the living room or the project or something like that. Yeah, they're really going to interrogate him on Garcia's tactical.
Well, one of the reasons they probably didn't want to wheel him out is because he was absolutely fed up with the situation, the quarantines, everything that was going on with Perth Glory last season. They didn't want him to run his mouth about how terrible everything was. Because they probably didn't want to put a microphone in front of his face because he would have just slammed the competition. And, he did occasionally. And, it's like the government, the competition, this, that. But, yeah, again, like going back to my original point, if they can provide the quality on the pitch, then people are more likely to come see them. Otherwise, the sugar hit only lasts for a couple of rounds, and then you realize it's actually just a UNICEF celebrity game.
Well, I disagree on that point, but we'll get back to that one during the designated marquee chat as Josh looks off screen disgusted that I'm disagreeing with them. But we also need to add this one-on-one contest is now becoming a triple threat. Nick DeBarno is cashing in his TNC in the bank. Nick DeBarno at the home of the I'm Upset meme, the FNR studios. Welcome to the show. Right off the bat, Going to throw a question at you because it's regarding Italian football. So I saved it for you. The home of the legends with the comment. I think it was Tom Williams who said that Aaron Mooy would be excellent for Italy. I'm assuming that's Serie A. Would Aaron Mooy be an Aaron Mooy be an excellent fit in the home of Calcio?
First of all, hello guys.
Hello.
Sorry for my delay. I was working in the land of the other code, the AFL this afternoon, so I just meandered over from Marvel Stadium and 40 minutes late. So obviously the best ability is availability, but we still got there. We still managed to make an appearance. There's Stoll in the comments, who's in Germany. He could make an appearance. I don't see why he's not making an appearance. I thought he had plenty of ticker. Look, even if I was on holiday, I'd probably still be here. But anyways,
hey, I jumped on from the campaign trail. So
you did, Josh. You did. And also, not gonna lie, guys, I'm on very little sleep, and I feel like Joey a few weeks ago when he literally wanted to kill us. So to answer that question about Aaron Mooy in Serie A, to be honest, like it wouldn't be terrible, but a lot of teams in Serie A, like it depends because a lot of those like lower teams play quite progressive, and they don't necessarily like to play slow plodding football. Like teams like Sassuolo, teams like Fiorentina, they're going to want to play progressive and play quickly. And we know with Aaron Mooy that when he gets on the ball, things slow down. This is no hate on Aaron Mooy. It's just a fact. Like when he plays, he slows down. The tempo slows down. He might not be terrible for a team that's looking to play on the break, an Udinese or a Spezia or someone who, play a bit more, counter-attacking football, and you're looking for someone to ping a long ball and get a little bit of control in midfield. But if a team also is going to be pressing, especially like an Atalanta or a Sassuolo or Fiorentina, and you're playing against Aaron Mooy, that the player of Aaron Mooy's ilk, he's the player you want to feast on because we know how slow he is in possession. Like he's the player that would crumble with that sort of pressure. Like that's just facts. I think there's a bit of a misguided,
Fiorentina has been a glorious home for Australian midfielders.
Oh yeah, it has. It has for what, half an hour? So look, I think there's a bit of this weird stigma and this sort of underlying thought that in Serie A and Italian football, because of Catenaccio of the last 20 years, going back to the 90s and the early 2000s, that Serie A is slow, plodding, boring football. But it's actually not that. There's a lot of teams that like to play progressive football and like to play a lot more attacking. But in every league, you're going to have teams who like to play on the break. Even in the Premier League, there are teams like that. So I think that's a bit of a misguided, kind of assumption when people think that. So I don't know. I don't know if per se you could just put it in a box and say he'd be good in Italy. Like he might be, but it depends what team he plays for. Like you got to be specific. Like if you're going to say he's going to be good for Italy, you got to say, okay, well, but what team in Italy? Like if he's playing for Atalanta or he's playing for Sassuolo or he's playing for Fiorentina, he doesn't fit their system. But if he plays for a team that likes to play on the break, maybe that might suit him. Maybe he'd want to play in a team that, are just going to have the ball, large U-shaped possession. Maybe, actually, it's funny. The best team that might suit him is Juventus because Juventus play the most boring catenaccio football in all of Italy. Like maybe that would be best for him. But we know Juventus aren't going to sign Aaron Mooy. That's, again, no knock on Aaron Mooy. It's just Juventus' transfer strategy. They've just signed Paul Pogba, for God's sake. So, yeah. I don't think
I don't for 1 second and we come back and say Juve not signing Aaron Mooy.
I was just saying, Josh, let's be real. Like if we're talking about plodding teams in Serie A that play U-shaped possession and could just play ball retention, Aaron Mooy is perfect for Juventus. But
are you sure maybe Brunswick Juventus could sign him?
Hey,
buongiorno.
potentially. But nah, look, I don't think, to be honest, I couldn't see him going to Serie A. Like, in all honesty, I just don't see it happening. I could see him ending up in the championship or playing somewhere else, but I just can't see a Serie A team. With the way that Serie A teams play these days, as I said, I don't think that he'll be ending up there, to be honest.
Well,
I would say it's probably beyond his level at this stage of his career.
On not knowing anywhere near as close to much about Italian football as you do, Nick D'Amano, I'd be inclined to agree with Josh, probably a bit beyond him, I would think, at this point. However, you did mention the championship there, a second tier. Italy, Fran Karacic maintained Socceroos selection whilst playing in the Italian second tier with Brescia. Could the second tier of Italy, could there be an upper echelon team in the second tier that
you got to remember one thing as well, Joey, wages. Now, Italian clubs, like think about how much he was on in China. Think about how much he would have been on at Brighton, or everyone's on the City contract as well when he first got signed and then was shipped off to Brighton and to Huddersfield, etc. He was on a lot of money. Serie B teams are not, they don't have that sort of money. Even a lot of Serie A teams don't have that money to shelve out. Aaron Mooy, if he wants to play, even in Serie A or in Serie B, he'd have to take a massive pay cut, This is, again, no knock on Serie B, but I think that, again, they just won't be able to afford him. Championship teams can probably afford more than what some Serie A teams can. That's just the cruel reality of what, the way that, cruel, harsh reality of world football right now, that there is so much money poured into England and the top two tiers and through TV rights, and especially through Italy, in the fact that they have a lot of issues with TV rights money at the moment. This isn't getting the violins out. This is just pure facts. Like, Italy has a lot of problems when it comes to their TV rights at the moment, and that's why they fall behind when it comes to being able to spend as big as what some other teams can. And the best example of it is looking at, I know we're going way away from Australian football, but Sven Botman signing for Newcastle instead of AC Milan. Like, they've got the Saudi owners. Milan don't. They can afford to spend more than what Milan can. So when you put into an Aaron Mooy situation, a team like, let's say, for instance, Watford could probably shelve out more wages than maybe, let's say, if you're looking at a bottom half Serie A team, looking at someone like Spezia, even one of the newly promoted teams, like even Monza, who are owned by Silvio Berlusconi, they're not going to be able to shelve out the same sort of money as some of these championship teams. And if Aaron Mooy if the team in the championship says, hey, we're looking for promotion next year and we can pay you more, I think you got to think as well, I think that he would take that. I think that, and he's familiar with the English sort of scene. He knows what he's getting himself into. So I don't know. Again, it's a gross generalization just to say one player can fit in one specific league, because not every team in every league plays the same way. You need to think about a lot more than that. You need to be more specific about what team, the fit, everything else. It's very different.
Well, we'll move on now to another free agent, a recent free agent. Hasn't been in the Socceroos squad for quite a while, which, if you'd said that around the time did I upset Josh Parrish? He's dropped out again. For listeners of the podcast, his stream has just dropped out again. But 2015, this man was nominated for the Ballon d'Or as the best player at the Asian Cup. Massimo Luongo didn't see a minute at the subsequent World Cup under Bert van Marwijk. And now, as Josh Parrish reappears on the stream, Massimo Luongo is a free agent, having left Sheffield Wednesday. Now, according to reports, he's been training and trialling with Reading in England. So that's potentially one move for him, a move to the Championship. Questions from the chat. Josh Parrish, did you turn your microwave on?
No, I did not. Thankfully, the food I was obtaining did not need to be microwaved.
There we go. So the food has arrived for Josh Parrish, but Massimo Luongo, currently trialling with Reading. I think we'd all agree move to the Championship would be good for him. But can we see a scenario, I think more importantly, for Massimo Luongo, if he gets this move right? Is there a path back to the Socceroos for Massimo Luongo heading into the World Cup? I haven't seen Shane Henry, otherwise known as our mate Geraldo, in the comments, although this is sure to summon him if he is watching. But do either of you boys see a path back to the Socceroos for Massimo Luongo?
Josh, you want to go first? Or are you eating?
I don't see it, unfortunately. I would love for him to come back into the mix, but he's just been out of the picture for so long now. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he never pulls on in a Socceroos jersey again, and that hurts. But I wish he was in the picture more. I wish he was in the discussion more. But it hasn't gone well for him at club level. Apparently He was said to have left Sheffield Wednesday of his own accord, which was news to him. So, sometimes these moves go poorly. It was sort of reminiscent of Jackson Irvine at Hull, but he's older than Jackson, of course. And yeah, I just don't see Graham Arnold seeing him as a viable option in a competitive midfield position, despite how fond of him I am as a player.
Sorry, Joey, do you want to go?
No, I was just, we were discussing this with Cammy Devlin, and once again, I see even if Luongo did come back into the team, I feel like he's coming in at the expense of somebody like a Dennis Jonro, and I'm not sure I like that trade-off, both purely because of my own fanboyism and the fact that Dennis Jonro is so much younger, and should ostensibly be a central figure in this midfield for the next cycle and potentially the cycle after that as well, not just this one. But what were you about to say, Nick DeBarno?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think I can't see him getting back in as much as I think he should be in this team, especially with the extra slots, 26 players. I think he's certainly talented enough. But as you said, Joey, I don't think it should be coming at the expense of someone like Denny Jonro. Looking at the last Socceroos squad, I know there were 28 players named. I think there is a chance for him if he goes to Reading and he puts together, because he'll have about 3 months, because I think the championship actually starts in about 3 weeks. I think it starts last weekend of July now instead of first week of August. So it's actually starting quite soon. So should he, in a hypothetical world, land at Reading, play match day one, start, get a good body of work in, I think he could. And I think when you say compare it against, okay, well, you're looking at who he's going up against, Gianni Stensness, Kenny Dougal, potentially for one of those spots. I would be picking Massimo Luongo ahead of at least Kenny Dougal. I know Gianni Stensness is a lot more versatile. He can play as a centre-back, and that might give him the extra sort of leg up because of that extra versatility. And Arnie might want to take Stensness for that break glass in case of emergency extra centre-back option. But I think Massimo Luongo might be a chance if he puts together a decent run of form. But do I see it happening based on the current Socceroos setup and considering he hasn't featured since 2019? It's going to be hard. Like we've said it so many times, like I can't see Arnie changing things too much from the players he's gone with throughout this cycle. And the only players I could maybe see being bolters would be players that were maybe in the Ollie Roos setup that were close to selection and players that worked under him in, say, in Tokyo. We mentioned names like Lockie Wales and such who were close. I just think that Mass is going to be really up against, he's going to have to put together a 3-month body of work that is going to have to be just next level, absolutely fantastic. But I think if he does do that, he should at least be in consideration because he's talented enough. We've seen him do it. He's only 29. And if I recall, based off seeing some, posts and people on Twitter talking about it, I think he ended the season, I know it was League One, but he ended the season pretty well at Sheffield Wednesday. It's not like he was playing poorly. He was actually playing all right. So, yeah, for me, I think he should be in consideration, but will he go? I have my doubts, and I'm leaning more towards that he won't be there in Qatar, and it's unfortunate. I think Asian Cup, though, maybe. If he puts together a really good season, maybe, but he's going to be right up against it to put together 3 good months. And he has to sign for Reading too.
That is the other question. So I'll move on. Speaking of Qatar, I will move on to another currently homeless Socceroo, I believe. But if you do have another either bolter or homeless Socceroo or anything that you want us to discuss, be sure to leave a comment because we are going to move to the Matildas soon. But before we do that, Trent Sainsbury, a lot of talk that he is set to sign in Qatar, I believe, for his club football, the Qatari League. Now, we have talked on this show about the potential flux that could be in place in that centre-back position. One would imagine that Sainsbury will be on the plane regardless, but in a potentially and it's a fraught battle to start at the World Cup, do you think Qatar is the right move for him, Nick DeBarno, because you're not eating?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, I'll quickly. I won't take too long, Josh. I'll get to you in a sec. I think he will. I think it's tough because will Arnie go with Kai Rolls and Harry? I assume Harry Sutar is a nailed-on starter. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. That when he's fit, if, he gets into some decent form, I think that Harry Souttar starts. But that second partner, I think it's quite up in the air, because I think on just quality alone, I think Trent Sainsbury gets in. But I would not be surprised if Arnie's leaning more towards Kai Rolls or Bailey Wright, especially Kai Rolls, considering that we know the high raps that Arnie has on Kai Rolls and the trust he put in him in those big games. I don't know if it's a matter of a good move, Joey. I just think that right now, I think Sainsbury's might have fallen down the pecking order, unless there was actually a significant injury that the injury really knocked him back a little bit. And maybe Arnie said it, like he would have played should he have been fit, unless he did say that and I missed it. But I don't know. I'm a bit disappointed, a bit underwhelmed if he goes to Qatar. I'm not going to lie, guys. I think he has enough quality to still be playing in Europe, but going to Qatar, I know that it's good for the bank account. Like, it sets him up for life. But in terms of play, like quality of the league and stuff, I think he can do a bit better.
Hey, this is 4G chess, in my opinion. He's acclimatizing early. He's getting used to it, and he'll be raring to go for the World Cup. No,
Graham Arnold did talk about how we had a home ground advantage now in Qatar because of all of these playoffs and acclimatization and the like. We are better at playing in air-conditioned stadiums than any other team in the world, apparently.
Yes. What a claim to fame. But yeah, Trent Sainsbury, I don't think he would do this deal unless he had some assurances that it wouldn't affect his World Cup prospects. And I think he will start in Qatar if he's fit. I think my opinion is that it was the injury that led him to not participate in those games as we would have expected. So I think he's a starting defender.
Coming back quickly, though, to that acclimatization point, I did want to ask you guys about this. Like, looking at somebody like France, their entire team is made up of players playing at some of the biggest clubs in Europe. Don't all of these massive clubs in Europe, all of their mid-season training camps and pre-season training camps, a ton of them take place in the Middle East? So, they're going to be quite familiar with the Middle East anyway. Like PSG, anybody that plays for PSG is going to be well familiar with Qatar.
I mean, that is true, and I think I
don't think a home ground advantage is that much of a thing.
I don't think so either. I think all these players go on holiday in Dubai as well and stuff. Yeah. Like, players seem to spend most of their time when they're not on the football pitch in these places. I guess the air conditioning is a bit different, but does it move the needle? Not sure.
Well, before we move on to the Matildas, so some comments coming in. So from Antonis Begonis, so sad seeing so many Socceroos struggling in this housing market and finding themselves homeless. Penny for Ante's thoughts. Blake Hampton leaving the comment with Josh's continued dropping in and out. Josh would love to get to the bottom of the technical difficulties, but he ain't spending any time on it because every 3 months a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland. Have you gotten to the bottom of the crocodile issues yet, Barnaby Josh?
Just a second. I need my hat.
Yes, for the benefit of the people on the podcast, Josh has disappeared. I don't know how he's going to fit his headset over the cowboy hat. Yes, here it is.
It's the headset on top of it's the hat on top of the beanie.
You're not taking the beanie off, Josh.
No, it's too much fuss.
The beanie stays on during TNC, ladies.
You may not like it, but the beanie stays on. Look, I'm still working on it. I'm still campaigning. So when I get into office, I promise I'll get to the bottom of the issue because, I'm not spending too much time on this podcast. I'm concentrating all my efforts on the emergency crocodile situation in North Queensland.
Indeed. Vote 1 for the Barnaby Josh party to bring the North Queensland Fury back into the A-Liga. Yes. But moving on from one national team to another, the Matildas, the under-23s, are in action in Asia. Don't worry. We've barely seen them either because there are no legal streams to watch the games here in Australia. No rights deal. Nobody has come to the party. Football Australia couldn't negotiate a YouTube stream with the host federation for the rights. So we have mostly been relying on updates via the various Twitter accounts. And indeed, actually, they were in action today against Singapore. And I believe that game has ended with a win whilst this show is on. For some reason, there are tweeting updates from the Football Australia account rather than the Matildas account, which is really annoying. But it has ended 4-1 for the Matildas in that game. That game coming back off the heels of their first win of the tournament, a heavy 4-0 win over Indonesia. That followed a 2-2 draw with a much stronger Thailand team and the meme result, the culture war result, a 1-0 loss to the Philippines in the opening contest of the game. I'm not sure how much of this you've been following along with this one, guys. I mean, I've been chatting with a few people, out there at NPLW today. I guess on a more systemic level, what value do you think is coming from this tournament, given that Tony Gustafsson's not there? Mel Andrietta is leading this team at the tournament. In fact, I came across an article in Swedish that Gustafsson is back in Sweden working as a television pundit for the Women's Euros rather than taking the team in this one. So do you feel as though we can be taking anything from these games?
Well, Tony Gustafsson certainly isn't. I mean, is he even watching them? I don't know. But does it matter? I think the person who picks the team is there, so you'll be right.
Look, to be honest, it's an interesting one. I mean, it does feel a bit weird that like that's the question I have. Like, is Tony watching? That's what I want to know. Like, I feel like that's the pressing question. Like, is he keeping an eye on these games? You'd hope so. I mean, decent
it's
results.
Sort of tree falls
recently,
in a forest kind of areas. Isn't it?
It is. It is a little bit.
If there's no stream,
do we even know that these games? Like, how do we know how they're playing? We can't see it. That's the thing as well.
How determined were Football Australia to get a stream going? Considering
Before
the results,
or after the recent results?
Yeah, well, I mean, surely you have some idea of how well prepared the team is, and clearly it hasn't been going great for them. Maybe they weren't too anxious to show everybody the state of things at the moment.
Well,
idle speculation.
A dodgy stream link did go around during that first game against the Philippines, so around the second half, so you got to come in. It looks, I think I put in the chat at the time, they looked like a quintessential Australian football team. And viewers and listeners of this show will know that isn't always a good thing. The reason they look like a quintessential Australian team, in my opinion, there was a lot of U-shaped possession, a lot of passing around the back line with players not showing for the ball. I think it was Hunt who was playing as a 6 in that first game, hiding from the ball in the great Australian and, maybe Spanish also, given Adelaide United, but just hiding in cover shadow. That game, error from Yada Wyman for the goal. It didn't look like they were playing fantastic football and just getting unlucky. It felt rather sameish. Like, I didn't see experimentation or anything like that. I just sort of saw the exact same thing, but just with the under-23s instead. Now, that might have changed. I mean, as we've talked about, they've scored 8 goals in their past 2 games, but not to be a dick or anything, but they came against Indonesia and Singapore. I mean, we saw what the Matildas did to Indonesia at the Asian Cup and how that worked out for them in the aftermath. But for me, my problem with this, you can't, in good faith, you can't get too mad at this. It's the under-23s. They're playing senior international sides. It's a tournament for experimentation and building depth. The results aren't important. Yada, yada, yada. We'll see the benefits of this in 10 years' time.
What's she got to do with it?
But my problem is we can just throw this on the pile. Yes, Josh Parrish. Big Sydney FC fan, Josh Parrish.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes. We can, but So we can just throw this on the pile of all the other tournaments, all the other games, that it's like, here's the reason why we shouldn't get mad. Here's the greater purpose. Here's why the results don't matter. Here's why the performances, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. So it just kind of continues the trend, so to speak. And like, we can't even watch them. So this is all just speculation on my part. And you can't, in good faith, slam them for games that you can't even watch. Like that judgment I cast was just the 45 minutes I watched.
No, you can't. And I'm literally just basing it on score lines. Scoreboard journalism is pretty lazy, but it's not. The score lines aren't good. The usefulness of under 23 football,
especially at a women's level.
Yeah, bizarre. I mean, I've called into question the usefulness of under 23s football at a men's level as well in the past. I think it's pretty pointless because if you're good enough, you should be in the senior setup anyway, and many of these players already are.
I mean, Ellie Carpenter is eligible for this squad.
Yeah, and Ellie Carpenter made her Matildas debut at like 17 or 16
15.
or something. It was 15, wasn't it?
A bunch of players have made. Sam Kerr debuted at 15.
And that's the secret. The secret of our greatest generation. I don't know how many eights you want to spell that with, but our golden generation of Matildas is the fact that they were thrown into first-team football in an under-resourced W League, as it was then known, and got heaps of minutes under their belt almost by accident, and then debuted at international level really early, and now they're vastly experienced at a young age. And it's kind of a trend in women's football to be, promoted into senior football a little bit earlier, and the age really skews young at MPL, W, and A-League level, A-League women's level. But under 23s, especially in a women's context, I just don't really see the value in it. Full stop. But putting the performances of this team aside.
Absolutely, Josh. Bang on, mate. Especially because you mentioned, how many of these players we've seen even recently get call-ups. We saw the baptism of fire with Jessica Nash at 17 years old being thrown in against the US. I know that's not the greatest example because we saw what happened, but I mean, how much can we really take out of this? I'm not too sure. So hopefully they do well. Hopefully they get another win. They've got one more game left, and we'll see what happens from there. But hopefully we can get a stream up. That's what I want to know, guys. Like, if we get through past this stage, are we going to get a stream? That's what I want to know.
It's not that hard. You just need a camera, a little or interface for your laptop, OBS. It's really quite easy, guys. So.
Josh, I want to come back to one thing that you talked about there. It was about how this current greatest golden, whatever we're calling them, generation of Matildas, they were all playing at 15, 16, 17. Do you think now that they are sort of established, they're not going anywhere, and so to speak, that trying to replicate that with the next generation isn't really helpful? And that, because what I've been observing with this depth sort of thing is like we've been playing players like Jessica Nash, and it's been a long-term thing, sort of like the players in the 20 to 25 year age group. If you're not an established Matilda, it really doesn't look like there's a pathway into that squad for you, because the caps are going to the teenagers and all of that sort of stuff, because that is traditionally the way that you develop and have developed depth. So we're seeing players like Indy Page Riley this week confirmed that she was transitioning to represent New Zealand at a senior level. We saw Ali Green do the same thing. Are we seeing that in trying to play so many youngsters and so many teenagers and bring them up, we are sort of missing a generation? I know Courtney Vine, before the last A-League women's season, went on the record and talked about how she felt that there was this cohort of players missing out. Do you feel as though that's something that is being overlooked in this current Matilda setup, getting minutes and experimentation, not just with teenagers, but with fringe players in the 20-year age level?
Well, clearly the hierarchy is a bit all over the place in that regard. I think it's also contextual, dependent on, in the last couple of years, I think we should have only been focusing on players that were going to play at the World Cup, because that's the priority. Jessica Nash, as an example, was never going to play at the World Cup. So why she was thrown in against the US and given the baptism of fire that she was, I'm not sure, because she struggled to even get minutes for Sydney FC at times in the season. So I think I'm very impressed with her as a person. I think she's a natural leader and very mature for her age. Spoken to her on Radio Dub, and I think she, if she puts it together, she could be a future Matildas captain, but not now, not for this World Cup cycle. It is hard to replicate, as you say, throwing the players in at an early age and developing them when you've already got an established group there who's kind of your core cohort. And Tony G has spoken a lot about the kind of disconnect in the youth programs, and they weren't active during COVID and this, that, and we're trying to restart them and all that. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of joined up thinking at the moment. And as you mentioned, a lot of players have been left on the periphery that could have been useful to Australia. It shouldn't have gone this way with players like India Paige Riley.
Well, I guess we could only wait and see. Really, I mean, you were actually on the show last week when we had the big Tony Gustafsson debate. Were you, Josh Parrish? Did you have anything you wanted to add to that debate that we had before I move us on to, judging from social media clicks and the like, is everybody's favourite topic in Marquees?
Yeah, I don't think we should keep the people waiting, to be honest. I don't think I can add anything further.
Okay, well then, on moving on to that.
貴様の拳などかほどにも効かんわい。お前はもう死んでいる。何？もうは匠でギゼブ。
I think we should give people a bit of a warning when it comes to decapitation and literal people exploding from the inside there, Joey.
It's anime. It's a Fist of the North Star. It's a well-trodden internet myth. Nani? It's even the episode of today's show on Twitter in Japanese, if you're a giant nerd that picked that up. But no, Nani.
You can tell who set the stream up today, can't you?
But Nani and Fabregas, it very much appears that they are coming. I mean, Nani seemingly imminent at Melbourne Victory. Man United are coming. Wouldn't that be something if his first game for Melbourne Victory is against Manchester United? But says Fabregas, I mean, you've got APL types tweeting out his highlights. You've got people talking about how he's on the way and he's negotiating and rather yada yada. He seems to be Sydney bound, not necessarily Sydney FC bound, but he seems to be destined for Sydney. I'll ask both of you guys first. Nani and Fabregas, they're coming in. Good moves, and who do you think is next?
Do you want to go first, Josh? Because I have my Nani bit last week, but I'll say it a bit later. So you go first, mate.
Okay. Well, it's been interesting for me starting my my new gig over at Stats Perform and being, I guess, exposed to a bit more of the mainstream media machine there. Because if people don't know, Stats Perform kind of services a lot of different websites. It's kind of like a content provider, and the demand for football content is very specific. And marquees are one of those things that really do move the needle in that regard. So it's been interesting for me to see the amount of attention paid to marquees, and the amount of workplace office chat that's revolved around how do we prepare content for these guys. If and when the deals go through, how do we get the pieces in place? It does matter. These stories do matter, and they do move the needle on that front. Is it a long-term impact for the league? No, it's a sugar hit. But those sugar hits, I think, are important, especially when you're launching a season. You want people to know about it. And you only have to look at the, Facebook comments underneath an Optus Sport post about Nani going to Melbourne Victory. And I saw so many comments of people tagging their friends and saying, we got to go to a game if he signs. And that matters. And maybe it's only a small percentage of those people that you can keep as loyal fans of the league. But as many people as are exposed to the competition as possible, that's casting the net further for potential, repeat customers. So I think they're both good signings because they're both genuinely big, well-known names. And, some of the marquees that we've seen over the years in the competition have not been that.
You mean Robbie Corrin wasn't a needle mover?
No, not at all. Not in the slightest. In fact, I forgot he even played in the A-League.
No, but I think you are right, Josh. I mean, I know we've talked about it on this show in the past. Get the footballing stuff right. I think the ship has sailed. The sugar hit strategy is obviously something that the APL is going after now at this point, and I think it can work. It can supplement things. I think my concern, I can see the justifications behind it. It's no skin off my nose if, it's not my money that you're giving these blokes if you want to bring them out. My concerns immediately transition into, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it well. And we can get to that, back onto what that means in a second. But the other important thing is I wrote a piece about this in The Guardian when the official announcement first came out. It can't be at the expense of doing the basics right. I mean, it's all well and good to have Nani and Fabregas come out and, announce all these marquees. They're coming to a competition that still doesn't have a youth league, a youth competition for its youngsters to play in, a dedicated young league for its youngsters to play in during the summer when the actual A-League men's season is on. So, it's that sort of thing. And it's like the poverty of thought that still exists in A-League clubs, their approach on the field. And even we'll get to the non-marquee recruitment as well. Some of the head-scratching moves in non-marquee recruitment. Why are players signing there? Is it just about ticking names off lists? So I'm fine with marquees coming out. I've made peace with it. My problem is that it has the potential to obfuscate so many of the other difficult things, and it has to be done right. But before we get to that, Nick, what are your thoughts on these two coming out?
As I said to you last week, from a football point of view, obviously I've got my thoughts about the Nani move. Obviously, in terms of him and his natural quality, we know that he has a lot of ability. But as players do get older, as we have seen all around the world and in any sport, that as players get older, naturally their bodies regress and their physical capabilities regress. And what I saw at Venezia last year was of a player that wasn't the same Nani that was at Manchester United, which I think is something we're going to have to expect should he arrive. I think in terms of the strategy, Josh, you were right about how Nani's going to get some bums on seats because similar to you, I saw a lot of people that I knew in high school who had no care about watching football but played FIFA and, loved Nani and loved Manchester United for that sense and had him in their ultimate teams and went, you know what, I want to actually see this guy play. Whether it's a long-term strategy and it's actually going to turn people into Melbourne Victory supporters per se, no. Let's be real about that. That's probably not going to happen in terms of being a rusted-on fan. You might get a few of them, but I don't think you're going to get the wide majority of it. Because you remember with David Villa, there was that initial groundswell. Melbourne City got a decent turnout for that first home game against Newcastle with David Villa playing. Because a lot of people just wanted to see David Villa. Now, I know David Villa and Nani, different propositions.
Yeah, but the thing was, David Villa was only there as part of a city football group.
No, I get that.
He hated being here. He didn't want to be here.
No, I get that. But I'm just using it as the best sort of example in terms of just a player of a name recognition sort of situation and them coming out and attracting the casual, the casual sports fan or the casual football fan, the Euro snobs, as we have coined them on soccer Twitter. I think it will be an interesting case study if Victory, say, make this confirm it this week and he plays against Manchester United. Because I think if you're going to play him, you're going to roll him out. The best possible way to do it is, you do it against Manchester United. You do everything possible to get him out here. And even if he only plays 20 minutes, he plays against Manchester United. I think you'll be able to convert a few football fans in that sense. Even with Fabregas, I think Fabregas going to a Sydney team is good. Depends what Sydney team. Because, let's be real, if he goes to MacArthur, is that really going to change much if MacArthur aren't changing their ticketing strategy and their marketing strategy? Are people going to want to pay the fees that MacArthur are charging to roll into Campbelltown Stadium, which is not in the Sydney CBD, and make their way out for a game there, especially if you're an away fan too? Is that really going to change things? That's my concern when it comes to that with Fabregas. Obviously, you'll get people when he plays away, when MacArthur come here, or when they play against Sydney FC at the new SFS, you might get some more people going along to see Cesc Fabregas play. But I'm just a little bit concerned about what's going to actually do for, say, MacArthur if that deal was to happen. But if he went to Sydney FC, maybe it's a different story. But yeah, look, from a pure footballing standpoint, as I said last week about Nani, and I mentioned before, he's still got quality. He's just doesn't have that same pace anymore. And in a counter-attacking team that Melbourne Victory are, we know he might have some real moments of individual brilliance, and I expect that because he can do that stuff. And obviously the quality of the A-League men's is not the same as Serie A, where he played for Venezia last year and he really struggled and he didn't even see minutes towards the end. But he doesn't have that same burst, if he's coming in to replace Marco Rojas, if Marco Rojas goes to Colo-Colo, the second I think of Colo-Colo, I start laughing, so I just think of Ante. But he doesn't. What
do we think of Colo-Colo, Nick DeBono? What are they?
I'm not going to say because I want to create extra editing for Josh. But we know that he doesn't have that same burst. Like he's not going to be able to maybe do that regularly. He might have a few of them early, but he's going to get through 90 minutes. So there's a lot of different questions about that because my worry is now recently is just making sure if you're going to bring these guys in and probably get to who's next, just making sure these guys can actually get on the park too. We don't want another Daniel Sturridge situation. And there was always that worry when it came obviously with his injury history that, Daniel Sturridge might not get on the park. And I know that Perth had very different circumstances to what things are going to be next season with a proper fixture, without border closures, et cetera, et cetera. But I just get this feeling that, if Nani's going to come along, I hope that we can see him play week in, week out. I hope that we can see him rolled out and that we see decent turnouts and a decent groundswell that comes with Nani playing. But I hope that also that the APL's strategy of not just signing Marquees, but they've spoken a lot about one thing that's been forgotten in this is that they think that as well with a proper fixture in place and with fans being able to plan for away trips, being able to plan ahead and say, well, on this week, I'll be able to get to Amy Park and watch Melbourne Victory play, say, for instance, the Central Coast Mariners, but I can't get to that. They'll be able to plan in advance. You might be able to see more people come through. So I hope that also translates into more bums on seats because it's not just going to be Marquees. Because let's be real, first few weeks, there probably will be some excitement around Nani. There probably will. There will be. There will be people that go to the early games in the season and want to see Nani play. But as the season rolls on, are we going to see those fans keep rocking up every single week? You expect if Melbourne Victory are playing well, which we probably expect them to be right up there again, you'd hope that they stick around for the whole season. You'd hope that support, sort of follows on as the season progresses. But, is it just going to be Nani and Fabregas to be able to get bums on seats? It's got to be more than that. I know it's a sugar hit, but there's got to be more than that. We can't just stop at Nani and Fabregas and Marquees. There's got to be a lot more that goes into it. And I know we're going to speak about Melbourne Victory, Manchester United, but I have a bit of a qualm about this. We are 5 days out from that. I've driven through the CBD that many times the last few days to go to work. I haven't seen one billboard for the game. That's fact. I went to the MCG yesterday. There was no promotion for it. I know it was the AFL, but there was no promotion nearby, no billboards along Punt Road, nothing that I saw. I went to Marvel Stadium today. When you drive along to get towards Docklands Drive, there's always this row, Josh, as you remember, this row of billboards for upcoming events. There were billboards for Andrea Bocelli, for Billy Joel, for other events coming up for, Western Bulldogs home games, North Melbourne home games. But there was nothing to promote Manchester United are coming out here to play Melbourne Victory or they're playing Crystal Palace. I don't know if maybe I missed it on the big Punt Road billboard if there was one yesterday. But for what I see, all I'm seeing is promotion for Richmond home games. I'm not seeing promotion for the game this week. And I know ticket sales are good, but who's going to know that Manchester United are coming here on Friday? There's been no coverage of it. And I'm speaking from someone who, as a media person, we've had no coverage of it. As far as anyone knows, people I've spoken to, I was with people yesterday, and I said, Manchester United are coming out next Friday. And they're like, is it this week? Why are we only being reminded of it 5 days out? Why aren't we being reminded of this in the weeks ahead, bar the scheduled social media posts on the 10 Football account about the football festival in winter? And to be honest, a winter football festival isn't something that I'd be overly excited for because I don't think fans want to go sit outside and freeze their asses off. So framing it as a winter football festival isn't necessarily, the best way to do it if you want to get casuals across. You want to frame it as a football festival, but don't drum up the cold part of it because it's been absolutely bloody nippy in Melbourne recently. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just my qualm about it. And I know we'll speak about the Victory United game later. But how can I... there will be excitement when I get to Friday. Of course, there'll be a bit of excitement. Cool, Manchester United are here. but there's been no promotion of it. Like, there's been nothing. And that's frustrating because I think they've sold a decent amount of tickets. But if we want to get something like we had when Liverpool were here 9 years ago, and Manchester United are arguably just as well supported as Liverpool in Australia, you want to make sure that you're getting as many people as possible to that game and really promote the game. Because if there's 100,000 people at the MCG on Friday night, that's not just going to make, that's going to make potentially front page news. It'd be making news bulletins. It'd be, going nuts on social media because you'd have potentially a really good clip of Fancy and Glory, Glory Manchester United. And that would be great. Like, and they'd be replaying that like they use You'll Never Walk Alone from that 2013 friendly. So I don't know. That's what really irks me because there'll be this last minute rush where people go, oh my God, I already have plans on Friday. Was there a game on? Was it this Friday? Where's the promotion been? That's my only thing.
The voice of a man who had to reschedule a Tinder date because he forgot.
Hinge, Josh. He's on Hinge now, Josh. No, but I think, Nick, as you're driving along and you're seeing those billboards for Bocelli or the Bulldogs or Billy Joel, you just need to know that for the longest time now, as an Australian journo, it's a matter of trust. You may be right, but as you're moving out and driving along the Yarra, the river of dreams, you know that it's just my life. And you know that Australian football, it's just the way you are. And honestly, it's just about, living with it. You know that only the good die young, and we didn't start the fire.
Ness and Dorman.
Jesus Christ! It's almost time to say goodbye. If we're gonna keep drumming in the song puns of
Billy Joel, love him. I wanted to bring up.
Putting me under significant pressure here, Joey.
Would you? I did want to jump in just quickly. I mean, in terms of the promotion of the game, I agree, Nick. I think it's been very haphazard. For example, you want cameras at the airport when Manchester United arrive. Heard zilch on arrival time, and if you get that footage, it goes around to various news outlets and you get plenty of publicity that the game's actually on. But it's been very difficult from my work perspective to get that information from either end of the organisation. So that's annoying. The lack of promotion about the game is annoying. But in terms of the Fabregas and Nani signings and the marquee piece, it only has to be one piece of the puzzle. It's not a be-all and end-all strategy. It has to be come for Nani and Fabregas, stay for X. And what's the follow-up selling point that's going to get people to come back? And for me, my driving, impulse to get to games when I was going as a fan was the atmosphere. And that's why I went to so many Melbourne Victory home games, because I love the atmosphere and I wanted to get in amongst the actives. And maybe that was about, because of the age bracket I was in at the time, and that really appealed to go with mates and be in the active end and everything.
But there's no reason you can't target that demographic. You don't need to. You don't have to target the nuclear family. I mean, disaffected youth's dollars are just as are worth just as much as theirs.
Yeah, exactly. So I think work needs to be done to try and rebuild. And this is on a club-to-club, more individual basis, but rebuild a bit of trust with the active supporter groups and try and get more supportive, more conducive policing and security environment for these kind of things to thrive. Because that active support is still my number one reason for why the A-League has tumbled from its sort of 2016-ish peak. Is the issues in that regard. So, but that's my thing. It has to be a piece of the overall picture. The fact that it attracts the casuals for one or two games is not going to do anything for the league's health long term. It needs to be that you're getting them to come and see something and coming and experience something that's worth coming back to, and that isn't going to be delivered by Nani or Fabregas unless they completely boss the competition, which we don't realistically we don't think we're going to. And the fact that some teams, including Sydney FC, have decided not to pursue Cesc Fabregas because they think his legs have gone, I think is an interesting development in that regard.
Hashtag TNC exclusive. There you go. It was dropped on this show first. Wasn't aware that you were going to drop that tidbit there, Josh, but there you go.
Hey, if you made it an hour and 34 minutes into the show, then you deserve a little something.
Yeah, go out and tweet it. Go out and tweet it.
Sydney FC could have offered Fabregas a contract, but they decided not to because they didn't think he was physically up to it anymore.
Yeah.
So the fact that MacArthur are going all in is interesting.
So if you are going to tweet that or share it on Reddit, you attribute it to Josh Parrish speaking on the National Curriculum podcast on ESPN Australia and New Zealand. Thank you very much, Josh. And I want to quickly get to one of the comments here. And Devix left a few in this regard. I'm a rusted-on fan. Marquees don't matter much to me. One thing that I would like from the APL is to reduce the foreign signing quota to 4, but increase the calendar of those that you do bring down. Without talking about the latter point, on the rusted-on point, now I'm 100% in agreement with him that the rusted-on fans probably don't care about Marquees. I think the problem that the APL is now running into is that for some clubs, their rusted-on fans probably number under 100 at this point, or are hovering around that mark. There just simply aren't enough rusted-on fans to run a league anymore, which is one thing that you've got to fix. And I'll get to you in a second, Nick DeBona, but I haven't spoken in ages, so it's my turn.
That's all right. No, all good.
Yeah, well,
I just want to put my hand up to know I want to be next.
I wasted my talking segment on Billy Joel puns. But Josh stole...
And whose fault is that, Joey?
I started the fire. One of Josh's complete alignment on one of Josh's what Josh said there about fixing the atmosphere, because that is going to be, I think, in the long term, a much more powerful inducement to getting people along to games, is when you are creating this tribalism, this wall of noise. Then that involves rebuilding relationships. It involves fixing policing. It feels like we're told every year that the over-policing of fans has been fixed, and it never seems to get fixed. I mean, was it last season during the A-League women's season where, like, fans of Sydney were monstered during an A-League women's game? Like, the A-League women's competition famed for its hooliganism. Like, what?
The A-League the A-League men's,
Joey.
the semi-final second leg, City versus Adelaide, where there was that fan dragged out of the City Active end as well.
So, yeah, that's one thing that, it feels like we're promised that policing is fixed every year, and it seemingly never is. And maybe, like, this is all a rich tapestry of things that need fixed. Maybe that comes back to the fact that we don't control our own venues. So, and that prevents, proper handling of policing, and that opens up its own whole tide of issues surrounding stadium availability, and that we don't own where we play. Hint, hint, Western United, hurry the F up. But also, another thing that I wanted to talk about is fixing it. It is the product on the park, and it comes around fixing it in multiple ways. It's like, if there's a great atmosphere or everything, but then we get a game which is just punishment to watch. Two teams U-shaped for 89 minutes. Like, there needs to be an improvement in the style of football as well. Not just in terms of the drama, because it's great to get drama and, and like storylines, but you can't run an entire league off relying on late red cards, late goals, late madness, all of that sort of stuff, and have that reliably happen, for the great game stuff. I think there also increasingly needs to come from media, increasingly needs to come from fans, demanding better play from teams and talking about it. Not just like it's something we've talked about to death on this show, the willingness of pundits, coverage to call out bad football.
But also, Joey, just on that, it also comes down to being able to have those conversations with coaches in press conferences, especially. Like, this is just putting it bluntly, but I know coaches aren't going to reveal their playbooks. I don't expect them to reveal their playbooks, but from going from an AFL environment to coming to an A-League environment, when I hear coaches speaking in press conferences, AFL coaches, there are some that are obviously a bit more shelved, but there are some that just are willing to say how it is. And, they're very open about what works and what doesn't work. And there's no gaslighting and things like that, or insulting our intelligence. And that's one thing that really irks me, that we have, that sometimes us as journalists, and even us as fans as well, we have our intelligence insulted when we go to these press conferences, or we have these conversations, because obviously we see things on the park, and if they don't work, they don't work. But I think that, sometimes I think people don't really see that, hey, maybe we actually know a little bit more than what, maybe it looks like. Like, we don't have to be coaches or have to play at a professional level to understand the game. Like, for God's sake, Ante's one of the smartest football people I've ever met, and he's never played at a professional level. Like, and people
He's got
just
eyes.
read
He
the
understands the game a bit.
Yeah, it's the eye test. And this is also, going beyond just us as print journalists. This is also, as you mentioned, Joey, going to pundits. Like, we need to be able to understand, well, what is, like, what do we see as good football? Like, smash and grabs and counterattacks and, P&P and U-shaped possession can only go so far, because a lot of these games last season were dross. Just putting it bluntly, that some of those games, majority were not good. And, like, I'm not saying I'm not saying for coaches to come out and say exactly how it is, but I feel like it'd be good to have more of those conversations, where it's in a press conference environment, but even in, potential other environments, being able to understand, okay, why did a coach make this decision, and being able to run through it. There's one thing I love that the Bundesliga do really well. And Josh, I think you told me about this. There's a TV channel, I think it's in Germany, I think it's the Bundesliga to do it, that they get a coach on, and the coach actually breaks down certain plays about why they did it, and sort of they get like a board up, and they sort of run through, certain things. Different coach comes on every week, and they do things like that. Like, I'd love to see those sort of interactive modes, because us as journalists, then we can do better with our jobs, because we can then look at what the coaches are saying and like why they did certain things. They can break it down for us and go, okay, this is why I started a certain player. This is why we made certain alterations in the way we played during the game. These were our adjustments by making this substitution. I think that would be really handy. And I think that would weigh as well. I think even as a fan, like, I think that'd be pretty cool. I think it'd be cool to see and hear that analysis, because, I think that as well as fans, they probably respect it hearing more from a coach who is in front of a board and showing it, than instead of us, dissecting it. Because they'd say, well, what do you know? You're just a journalist. Like, you look at it through a different lens. I just wish that, I wish we could have those greater conversations with coaches, with football administrators, with players, and be able to understand that sort of stuff a little bit more, instead of, not feeling like, as well, like, I don't want coaches to feel like we're out there to rip their heads off with understanding strategy in post-game press conferences. We just want to know. Like, we want to, because it will help us with our analysis. It will help us with our understanding of what they're trying to do. And we can critique or, comment on it, and not feel like we're clutching at straws, but be able to actually get it firsthand from the coach as well. So I don't know. Again, it all depends. Some coaches obviously are going to be a bit more shielded with what they want to say and what they don't want to say, and that's fine. But I just wish that in a world where we all could hold hands and sing Kumbaya, that we could all be able to have that sort of understanding. So yeah, that's what I would like to hear.
I'm really sorry that PK put you through this, Nick.
I'm not talking about PK though. I'm not talking about just, I'm talking about all, like, it's every coach, and this is just normal. But
Joey's gone.
This is levels every coach in the A-League, like, that, and even it goes beyond the A-League. This goes to the national team. It goes to everything. Like, we want to be able to hear these conversations and have these conversations, and I feel like it'd be good. And I feel like us as journalists as well would really appreciate those conversations and be able to have them.
I think you've hit
I
on
had
something
some
there,
rice go down the wrong way because I was laughing, you dick.
But to be clear, I'm not just talking about Kisnorbo. I'm talking about everyone. So please don't come after me on this one, guys.
I'm stitching Nick up there to say it's a personal thing, because there's an overall reticence to engage, and what coaches do by giving a brick wall and giving nothing answers is they basically shut off the content cycle for the week that should be occurring, which keeps the A-League in the headlines, which is coach responds to this criticism, etc. and so on. And, taking the AFL media as an example, they do such a good job of generating their own controversies and their own headlines every week, from talking heads on TV, from journalist interactions with coaches at press conferences. It is such a well-oiled machine. And I mean, looking at this a little bit cynically, of course, not just in terms of improving the game here with better scrutiny and better, I guess, discourse around tactics and so forth, but also just keeping the A-League in the headlines. It's important. And yeah. I don't think coaches in this competition who think everybody's out to get them and try to present basically stony-faced stock answers to the media realize how important their job actually is out there in terms of the health of the league. You need people who are willing to engage, and hopefully the Marquees bring that. I think Cesc Fabregas, from what I've seen, is a sensational media talent. I've seen him on panel shows and things in the UK. He's really, really good value. He speaks amazing English, of course. I'm not sure about Nani. I've never seen him in an interview setting, but hopefully the coaches can encourage like a little bit more back and forth and be a little bit more open to engaging with those sorts of questions this season.
Well, we have had a response on the comments to Nick Nabano's statements. It's a two-parter. Your comment started with what I love about the Bundesliga, and that is exactly where the issue begins and ends. Why on earth do we continue to compare our league to the rest of the world? Second part of it, and he's written a third of two. You're cheating, Matthew. You can't have three of two, because of the product on the park is actually pretty good. In fact, if we are to compare it to anything, I believe our football is better than the MLS pound for pound. Requisite TNE. Fuck the MLS. Sorry, you're going to have to edit that one out, Josh. It's at 145.38 if you want to write that down. As for the AFL comparison, you cannot compare the two. One has 100 plus years on the board. The other keeps eating its own and rehashing itself every 3 to 4 years. It's all about building on what we have. Response, Nick Nabano?
I just, in all due respect, Matthew, I think you've taken my answer out of context. I'm not talking about the playing standard of the Bundesliga. I'm talking about the analysis of the Bundesliga. I'm talking about what they do in terms of serving up a product, in terms of what they do with their TV rights and what they do with, as Josh said, keeping the sport in the headlines, keeping conversation and discourse going. Because when the football ends, it feels like here, the conversation ends. We don't have enough of those, TV shows and like we're one of the few that keep the conversation going. But we don't have the resources to do something like AFL 360 where they can do 4 shows a week. Again, I'll get to my AFL bit in just a second. But what I'm saying is I'd like to see us take that aspect of analysis that the Bundesliga do. And there are other leagues around the world, I know that that's something you don't want to hear, that do things like that. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying we have to be like the Bundesliga on the pitch. I'm not expecting the A-League men's to be a top 5 European. Like, I'm not expecting us to be at that standard. And that would be ludicrous of me to say I expect us to be at the level of the Bundesliga. But what I'm saying is, I want our analysis to be as good as the Bundesliga. And I don't think that's an unfair sort of comment to make, because I feel like that's a good strategy to get to. In any sport, I feel like it's a good strategy to have that level of analysis because it just makes the game stronger because you're having those conversations. The second part about the product. Look, again, that's subjective. So that's your opinion. That's fine. In my opinion, there are some teams that play some really good football, but in my opinion, there are some teams that could play better. We talk about this every week. I feel like our football standards could be better here. And that's fine. And in terms of comparing to the MLS, well, I don't want to compare to the MLS because, as Joey said, that line, yeah. And in terms of the AFL comparison, I can compare the two in a sense of, again, it's media coverage. I'm not comparing it in terms of two entities in terms of what they do as industries. I'm saying we need to be able to get ourselves back in the news cycle, but in a positive manner and try and get those conversations happening again. The AFL media has different sort of things that they probably should be doing better with when it comes to drumming up conversation. There's a lot of things that I don't agree with that they do there, but that's a conversation for probably a different podcast at a different sort of time altogether. As Antes mentioned so many times, he loves to do an AFL podcast on ESPN. So definitely maybe for that one day. But as I've said, look, I do feel like we need more stuff like that. We need more shows. We need more sort of that sort of analysis. And, as Devek said here, we need to have stuff like this. We need to have these sort of analysis programs, lighthearted programs, classic matches, mini matches. We need to drum up conversation. And conversation is not a bad thing, especially when it's put out like that, when it's on Paramount or Keep Up or 10 Play, whatever it might be. I know Daily 24 Hour, it's a lot of resources, right? But having more of those magazine programs, analysis programs, I think that's something we have to aim towards. And that is not a bad thing at all. If we have more of those analysis programs, sensational. Obviously, the analysis depends what's being said. But if you have those opportunities to get a coach or even a player on to talk about that stuff, I reckon that would be really, really cool. Like, imagine chatting to Cesc Fabregas. Cesc Fabregas, this is one of the most intelligent footballers of the past 20 years, on a show every week or every once in a while, and he's dissecting a game. Don't tell me as a football fan, you wouldn't want to hear what Cesc Fabregas has to say. Because it would be, we all as the Australian football public, or Australian public actually, lost our minds last year during the Olympics when Ian Thorpe was running through how someone does 100 meters in the pool and the strategy that goes on behind it. Why can't we go for the same thing here? Why can't it come from someone like Cesc Fabregas? If Fabregas is here, let's use him. That was the big qualm about Keisuke Honda being here. We had him here. We didn't use him in more than just an on-field thing. We had an opportunity to market him and get him out there in the public and everything. If Cesc Fabregas is here,
that's
Nani's
fact.
Here,
that's fact.
Yeah, that is fact.
I feel I do need to add though that was a two-way street.
No,
Keisuke
absolutely
wasn't exactly keen on media, which will
absolutely
come back to one of the other conversations I wanted to have in a second. But one of the other questions I did want to pose was Fabregas and Nani. As a sugar hit, is it enough? Like people like to talk about Ono, Heskey, and Del Piero. 3. Do the APL needs to target another sugar hit, another 1 or 2 sugar hits potentially? I mean, Charlie Austin has signed with Brisbane Roar, not on the same level. Fair F's to Charlie Austin. He had that Park Life video. He's not on the level of Nani and Fabregas. I mean, I'm looking through. I went to Transfer Market. I looked at free agents, set the settings to over 30, looking at some of the names. Luis Suarez, who I think he's moved to South America, fell over, so he's still a free agent.
Yeah, but didn't we already try with Suarez and he said no? That was like a rumor a few months ago.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he's still a free agent. Changed. Somebody like Cavani, Diego Costa, Isco, Marcello, going down the list here. Do we need to look? Juan Mata, he's still a free agent. Do we need to? Is 2 enough if the APL are going to go down the sugar hit pathway?
Go on, Josh.
I think three is better than 2. I mean, we could.
3 is the magic number, Josh.
Good things come in 3s. The power of 3.
I so want to make several jokes right now, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, Joey, don't.
But also, in equal measure, 2 is company, but 3 is indeed a crowd.
He's a crowd.
So I'm torn on this one.
It depends who, Joey.
I mean, we had a list of 35 apparently targeted.
Yeah, but how many's left? Because that's also in a women's sense as well, aren't there? Men and women that's on that list.
There is.
Yeah,
and it's not, and it's also not restricted to that list.
Yeah, no, sure. In terms of other players that are available, like just looking at recent rumors, Isco's signing in Serie A. Cavani apparently is wanted by Berlusconi.
Wanted by Berlusconi.
Berlusconi sounds a lot different. He's not wanted by the Italian government. He's wanted by Monza.
Even then, I wouldn't want to be wanted by Berlusconi in any sense.
Yes,
bunga or otherwise.
Josh, Jesus Christ. In terms, look, I think it'd be good for another. Like, why not? If there is a player that's available and there's a fit for them, like someone like Juan Mata, I think that would be a pretty cool signing. Just
Danny
in terms
Alves.
of high NRI. Danny Alves.
Alves.
Like, of course,
fresh off being labelled the biggest waste in football of the 21st century, would Hatem Ben Arfa be a good addition to the A-League?
I mean, he was pursued by Western United back in their inaugural
as their inaugural signing. Yeah.
Didn't come off, but
I mean, he'd be cool. He'd be cool, but like, is he gonna get many bums on seats, Joey?
I mean, the streets don't forget.
Yeah.
But maybe the A-League will. What's Adel Tarab up to these days?
He's still playing for Benfica, unfortunately, unless we can get a transfer fee out to Portugal. And
right. He's still on their books.
Yeah. Look, honestly, if there was someone like a Juan Mata, or just scrolling through these names, Danny Alves, as Josh mentioned, who's even still around? Alex Teixeira doesn't have enough NRI. Dries Mertens.
Aaron Lennon?
Yeah, maybe Aaron Lennon potentially. Look, in an
Or
ideal world,
are we getting too close to
if
Charlie
we're talking
Austin
about
territory?
the ultimate sugar hit that will rust so many teeth, and will basically make
Do you mean
hot.
decay so many teeth?
Yeah, Joey, I've had a long
Nick
day.
Nick
mate.
has metal teeth. We haven't spoken about this before, but
Yeah, metal teeth as a Collingwood supporter. But yeah, so Zlatan, if in an ideal scenario, obviously we know that he's not the same player, but the ultimate sugar hit, Zlatan is like up there with Ronaldo and Messi for ultimate sugar hit. But I've said that Zlatan coming down here probably isn't the best idea given his body right now, and he is staying at AC Milan. So yeah, but to be honest, I think the next one, whoever it might be, I just hope that it's it's a good one. Like it's someone who's actually gonna be able to play as well, Joey. I think it's hard to say who is next entirely.
does it matter the nationality of the player as well, and what kind of diaspora they might
Potentially.
inspire to?
It's
to
Premier
come and watch?
League. Premier League experience is
Josh,
the one and the NRI scale that bumps you up your NRI Premier League.
Yeah,
experience.
but I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about.
No, but you are right that Danny Townsend spoke about using these marquee sugar hits to target specific ethnic communities.
Exactly, and the Brazilians came out in force when the women's team played here.
Josh, I want to ask you.
Capybaras are better than kangaroos.
Yeah, Josh, I want to ask you because you spoke about this on Twitter during the week. But you speak about targeting certain ethnic communities, but the failure of not going after is it Nguyen from the Vietnamese attacking midfielder who went to League Two. That's something I think that would have been a decent. I don't know about Marquee potentially because he's a good player, but like getting him out here just to play, I think that's a missed opportunity.
Well, if they're not targeting Chiellini for certain reasons, they're probably not targeting anybody like that.
But we saw the Vietnam fans down here in January.
I know, but
yeah,
I'm talking about the mindset. If they're not going after Chiellini because he's perceived to not be a big enough draw because he's a defender.
I'm not sure if the people making these decisions know who Quang Hai is.
Yeah,
that's the long and short of it. But the Vietnamese community down here certainly would, and he's a baller. So I would love to see him targeted. I think his eyes were probably set on Europe once his Hanoi contract was expiring, and it was a pretty unique situation with him. I've had some sort of feedback on that tweet during the week about how the owner of Hanoi was completely deluded. Wasn't going to let him go for any sort of transfer fee unless Manchester City or PSG came in for him. That there's some sort of megalomaniac owner of Hanoi that had him on this ridiculous long-term contract. So you had to wait for it to expire, which is interesting. But my point was more that there are Southeast Asian players that could add a lot of quality to the competition. Quang Hai isn't the only Vietnamese national team player who I think could do really well here and could draw some extra fans. Kong Fong, for example, was very good, I thought, in the Asian Champions League against Sydney and wouldn't come at a king's ransom.
Well, I guess we have been talking for quite a while, so I am going to move us on. And I'm going to remind everybody watching that my name is not Nick Stoll. I made no promises about show length of false promises.
So what's this one called?
Move away from the mic, Nick. Move away from the mic.
No. Run the memes did the 3 coffees. Is this because I've forgotten what the one beyond 2 hours is. That Ristretto or is it Lungo? I think this is a Lungo edition.
Is this a Lungo Classico?
A Lungo Classico? Oh, we got our Julius Vinyl coffee still out there.
Would this be a grande at Starbucks?
Oh gosh. No. Isn't it grande a small or some bullshit? Who goes to Starbucks?
I know.
That's a disgrace.
Are you from New York, Joey?
No, they got the reaction I wanted though. Moving on, very briefly, there has been other signings happening throughout the A-Liga. We don't have time to go through them all, but gentlemen, have any caught your eye?
Riku
back to Brisbane, the fan favorite.
I love that. I love
Good signing.
The fact that they were able to get him back. He's a proven performer in this competition. He was sensational for them. They really missed him last season. And the fact that he's on loan again with a view to signing him permanently, not a option to sign him permanently, I think was a telling bit of language in the press release. So maybe he won't stick around, but I think that will... that's not the kind of signing that's going to draw in new fans, but it might bring fans back who watched him before and liked him before. And that's also the part of the A-League puzzle we were talking about before, targeting casuals and new supporters. I mean, we used to have lots of supporters come to games. Where have all those people gone? How do we get those people back? That's also part of the picture. So, but Riku Danzaki, great player. I'm very, very pleased for Brisbane, and they seem to be a little bit more ambitious in the transfer market this season than they were last year, and I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, just on that, Josh, I mean, they're forming quite if it all pans out with Austin and Danzaki and, Henry Hall had a good end to the season last year and whoever else they might be targeting for their attacking stocks as well. We've still got Jay O'Shea. It's forming to be a decent little attacking sort of, part of like the sort of attacking three or whatever they look to play next season. I mean, Warren Moon's always chopping and changing formation, so we don't know what he's going to roll out with next season. So they've been good at so far in the transfer window. But in terms of the signing, for me, it's Paul Izzo to Melbourne Victory. Ivan Kellever gone. I think just in terms of vibes, yeah, H to the Izzo. Very good work
signing announcement.
Yeah,
good signing
that was really good.
For once, we got some good stuff and not Shrek meme cringe from Melbourne Victory.
Look, Paul Izzo's a good signing. It's an upgrade at goalkeeper. As much as we loved Kellever for his vibes, he had some suspect moments between the sticks. I again, loved his attitude and everything else when he was down here. But Paul Izzo is I think, a very ample replacement. But the one thing I want to talk about, guys, is the MacArthur Six. Now, they basically made a signing every day. Now, we'll rattle through them quickly. Skatardis, Apropotamidis, Kieran Backus, Anthony Carter, Matthew Miller, and Ivan Vujica, returning from purgatory. So 6...
Returning from alien abduction, I think.
Vujica wasn't injured last season. Let's just say that.
Yeah. That's all we'll say on that part. But anyways. So 6 players coming in from MacArthur. Now, they are all very much like... we talk about needle-moving signings, but these are just such just whelmed, as Joey said the other day in the chat. I am whelmed. That's how I think we all feel we saw those signings. Like, Skatardis. Astro. Just like, cool, but there's been nothing that's gone, shock value, It's cool to see Matthew Miller back, but nothing's really gone like, whoa, that's big, you know what I mean?
Well,
that changes the way they play.
They're obviously clearing out space for Fabregas, so they can't go too big on the other signings.
I felt like MJF watching those signings, just mid, and not midfield, but just
mid.
Yeah,
straight up mid. Yeah,
just a lot of A-League squad filler. Packing peanuts.
I think Miller's a decent signing. I think.
Miller's an alright signing, but I'm looking at this. We have no idea how Dwight York wants to play or he's going to play. Yeah. He's coached one competitive fixture with the All-Stars against against Barcelona. And I still don't know, watching these signings, what sort of team we're going to get. So, and looking at that team, there's no real identity emerging from the signings that have been made either. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, interesting to see Izzo back. I mean, Xanthi Victory now. They're all getting the band back together. Izzo going from the Greek second division to the A-Liga. He's gone from a league in which the owner threatens you with a gun to one in which the owner threatens you with the price of lettuce. But no, it should be interesting to see him back in the A-Liga and going about it.
If you don't keep a clean sheet, you're going to pay for lettuce yourself.
Nick, is this anti-Italian discrimination?
Yes. Just talking about just before we move on, Victory signings. I just want to ask you guys, not including the potential of Nani, but what do you think about their signings? Because other than Izzo, I think they've been very whelmed. Again, nothing that's been a significant upgrade. They haven't upgraded at left back since Davidson's gone. They haven't upgraded at centre back either. At striker, jury's out on Tommy Juric if he can get fit. What do you guys think?
They're banking on
Juric
continuity.
Is out. Sorry. Sorry, I'm on a podcast with 2 angry men.
Josh, I'm just tired, man. I'm so tired.
All right. We'll get back to that one on another day because there is There's supposed to be 3 more topics. So
Yay.
Man United, we've touched on them. Man United are coming to Australia. I think we've touched on this one already. Nick's not a fan of the marketing. Cristiano Ronaldo's not coming to Australia. He wants out. How many tickets were attempted to be resold or returned when that news came out, I wonder. I will ask one question. We know these tours are never about the Australian team that plays in them. It's always about the big international brand and the promoters recouping their investment. I'll ask you boys this. What does success for this game look like for Melbourne Victory? On or off the park?
Off it, you're getting, decent media coverage during the week. Like, I mean, but it's not just focused on Manchester United being here. It's like you get the real focus on Melbourne Victory being here. I think if Nani
success for Melbourne Victory is if you can keep a Sharon away from every Manchester United player.
Like, I'm writing an article on this, and that is legitimately one of the things that I think. That you don't let this promote your rivals here in Melbourne.
Have a steak knife ready, so if there's ever a Sharon, just pop it. Just get it ready. Just pop the Sharon. A good turnout.
I think
that's
a job for Popper this week.
I think a really good turnout on Friday as well. Like I'm talking 90,000 plus. Like I know it's a high benchmark because not even an AFL game's got 90,000 this year. But you got Manchester freaking United coming out here, and you announced this game in I think March or April. So you'd want to be getting a really
in the
good
world.
turnout. Yeah, but also as well, I think it's really important that if they are going to announce Nani, that they make sure that the deal gets done beforehand and he plays on Friday too.
It's like just a Melbourne Victory. It's too late, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know about that, Josh. I don't know about that. But to be honest, like I think from a game point of view, like a good turnout, like the quality of the game, what can we expect? It's going to be 45 minutes of the regulars, then 45 minutes of the kids. It's more going to be actually probably about Manchester United than it's about Melbourne Victory. And that's the same. But hopefully a decent turnout and, keeping Sharons away from Eric Ten Hag at all costs.
Keeping them away from Bruno Fernandes, I think.
Who is the most likely player to hold a Sharon from Manchester United?
It's Bruno.
Harry Maguire?
Oh, I mean, unless they're trying to draw a size comparison to his head, I don't.
You could see it.
I could say it, but I think it's Bruno that they'll go after. He's been the player who's been vlogging on the plane. I don't know if you've seen that stuff. Calling subtly dissing his teammates by calling McTominay the McTerminator and saying Fred needs to run a lot.
We're gonna see. Let me just say, I think developments will come out that will attract some eyeballs onto this from a Melbourne Victory perspective, some storylines that will develop. Watch that space. Another one, a big one, I think, is avoiding injury. It's not often thought about, but man, I remember back, Man United coming out, a Man United tour of Australia robbed the Socceroos golden generation of potentially one of its greatest performers. It was a friendly, Man United versus the Socceroos. Andy Cole took out Simon Colosimo, horrifically damaged his legs, wasn't the same player in the aftermath. And that doesn't happen. I went down this, like as a sliding doors moment. I was having this discussion with my old man the other day. Lucas Neal probably stays as a wing back if Simon Colosimo doesn't destroy his legs. It's probably Moore and Colosimo at centre back for the Breakthrough World Cup. So, like, avoiding injury is a thing as well in these sort of games for Melbourne Victory, which is going to be something to watch moving forward. But, yeah, I think, just to concur with you guys, Victory, avoid injury. I don't know what Danny Townsend's always going on about getting email addresses for your files. See if you can get any of those email addresses that you can send spam to. Don't get hammered 7 or 8-0, which I wouldn't worry about. But yeah, don't do that.
You're talking about the spectators. Don't get ejected.
Yeah, don't get ejected. Don't get arrested.
Sorry, Joey.
That's for the players and the fans. Go ahead, Nick.
Can I
He's
just
not
say
coming.
the other
It's
thing?
okay.
We like these tournaments, you know, they usually breed opportunities for, say, the Manchester United or Crystal Palace youngsters or any of those Premier League teams to come out, and that's when they sort of burst onto the scene. Like, remember Jesse Lingard had that A-League All-Stars game, and then from there he was, you know, in the spotlight somewhat. I think this is a good opportunity for Melbourne Victory's youngsters. Now, this is we're talking remember Seb Pasquale, like what happened when he had a big game against Juventus. Now, obviously, it hasn't worked out for him in the way that we all would have loved to, but he got the move to Ajax after the really good showings against Juventus and Atletico. Like, if there's a Victory youngster that really can grasp this opportunity and put together a really good cameo, like Brendan Rodgers was fiending over Connor Payne after that friendly. Obviously, again, didn't work out for Connor Payne, but like, say, Nishan Velupale or William Wilson or Leighton Brooks or someone just of that ilk gets an opportunity for 45 minutes and, you know, scores or does something that's like, whoa, like this is like, Jesus, like this guy's actually really showing out. It'd be good for him because it put him on the radar. Because I think one thing got to remember, there will be like eyes from European audience. Like there'll be people watching, like there are a lot of United fans that will be watching this game and Premier League fans that will keep an eye on it. And if some guy takes the mick out of Harry Maguire, like if Nishan Velupale takes the mick out of Harry Maguire, that is going viral. Like there is no doubt about it. Like that will go viral and people will be like, oh my God, who is this kid? I know that's a very sort of TikTok
but a traffic cone could take the piss out of Harry Maguire at this point.
Still,
you might need to aim slightly higher.
Yeah. Okay, maybe not Harry Maguire. Let's say takes on Rafael Varane, right? Or, you know, makes Bruno Fernandes look silly. Like that's going to be like, geez, like that was really cool. Like we saw it with Gareth Quoll, you know, with the Barcelona game. Like as much as it was an exhibition game, like it got eyeballs on him. So I think there's a good opportunity for Victory's players, even for any of the teams playing in this. Brisbane Roar as well, and Perth Glory, I believe, are playing as well. Just, you know, this is good for them. It's a really good opportunity for the youngsters. That's what I'm most, you know, excited about. Even someone like Ben Falami, so it's someone who's like more of a senior player. Ben Falami has a good game in this, and who knows who's watching, and who knows, someone might look in the last 2 months of this transfer window and go, hey, I want him. Like, let's get him over. And happy days. Maybe that then helps him out. We talk about games before the World Cup. Who knows?
What a shame that perennial A-League youngster Nick D'Agostino is recovering from shoulder injury. So the 24-year-old young prospect can't play in this game. But I'm going to move us on. We're going to try to get through these as quickly as possible. It is something which has exploded on Twitter recently. These in the know accounts, so to speak. It is the silly season. It is marquee season. And it's just, they've been feasting on, I mean, you touched on it, Josh. There is just a ravenous appetite for big name moves, but even just transfers. Transfer stories get clicks, they get retweets, they get likes and shares. An account with 30 followers can tweet out some salacious news, and inevitably it will get a few sincere retweets amongst the quote tweets dunking on them for making shit up, and so to speak. And then the narrative shifts, and in 6 months' time, it's not some random account made up a false rumor about Alan Shearer coming out of retirement and playing for Western United. It's Western United try to bring Alan Shearer out of retirement. Just the narrative shifts. I think if you are watching this show or listening to this pod, I like to think that you have a bit more scope for critical thought than the norm. Think about what these anonymous accounts are trying to accomplish. Like, what is one of the things that all three of us here get as a result of our journalistic work?
What we get?
Yeah.
In terms of what, like tangible?
We get paid.
Oh yeah, okay. I didn't want to say it. I thought this was some but philosophical question. Yeah.
No, but with that comes a level of standards. Yeah. And it comes a level of professionalism and stakes. When I put something out there, I attach my name to it. If I get it wrong, the next time I report something, and it could follow me for years that I got something wrong. If I get something wrong of a sufficient degree, I need to issue a retraction. There are consequences if I get things wrong. And you know where I stand. So think about that when you're seeing, that's what I'd say. When you're seeing these random accounts tweet something, what are they achieving? Are they getting a laugh? Is it something like that? And even if they're not doing it for the lols and they're not memeing and it's some legitimate anonymous account, ask yourself why the information is being put out there. Who stands to benefit from this information? Why am I being told this? Basically, what I'm saying is all of these in the know accounts think not just about the information being put in front of you, but why is the information being put in front of you? Do I trust this account? Was this account made in July 2022 and suddenly has better sources than every single journalist in the country? If it is a new account that is getting information right, that has come out of nowhere, that has no track record, ask why is this account being given this information? Who stands to gain from this information getting out there? Don't just be a sucker. Think. That's what I'd say about these in the know accounts.
Josh, you want to go first?
Look, I don't really care, to be honest. You know,
To be fair, I don't care.
to be fair, I don't care.
Like in the grand scheme of things, I don't care either, because all of these accounts disappear at the end of the off season, and you never hear from them again when there's actual football.
I mean, most of these have just been run by bored fans who it's just the off season's too long, clearly, and you know it also reflects, I guess, the paucity of like media coverage of sport that you just don't. You have these in the know accounts filling up the TL. I just say mute them when you come across them and don't think about them again.
And can I say
what I don't like is
go on, Josh. Go. Sorry, Joey. Go.
I don't like that it sort of like affects the discourse. Like you get fans angry with clubs for not doing a move that was never actually happens, and it just reinforces this whole sugar hit. Like there's never a discussion around, this player's been linked with here, and that's what everybody wants to talk about. Not how does this player fit into the system, and then how will they play? How does this affect the team? In 6 months' time, do you, like everybody wants to hear about this player's moving here, and then okay, will you click on the subsequent story, the subsequent interview about why you should care, who this person is, or what sort of player they are? Nah.
I mean, but that's a wider problem with like football transfer.
Yeah,
culture.
and this is me venting about just like the
is
broader culture.
That's why I like the TIFO Sensible Transfers series so much, is because it's actually about team building. It's not about the rumor mill, and I really like that.
And could I just say, like Joey, you obviously you've broken a lot more stories than I have, but just in terms of transfer, this is what I think anyone would know in terms of breaking a transfer story. Something like transfers, sackings, something of that gravity, there's a lot on the line there if you get it wrong. Like, if you are wrong, you're really wrong. Like, people don't forget that. And you have to stick your neck on the line, as Joey said. You have to issue retractions. Like, you need to be, even for us, you need to trust your sources to the absolute hill. Like, you can't just go, someone told me on the street that, Cristiano Ronaldo is going to Lazio or something like that. Or, I just trust Joe Blow down the road or something like that. Like, you got to think about, that sort of stuff too. So we, like, us as journalists, like, we're putting our necks on the line as well when we're trying to break stories. And there's levels to the stories that we do, like from a match report, which is straight facts, to coaches' press conferences, which is straight facts, to something like that. You're breaking a story. And if you're wrong, it could, your neck's on the line with that sort of stuff. And I just don't see why, like, as Antonis actually has put in the comments about these accounts make the greatest arguments to shorten the offseason. Of course they do, because fans are bored and fans think, I'm going to get a kick out of making an A-League account by putting an A-League logo and adding a moustache and fake eyebrows. Like, I'm sorry, if you want my facial hair, guys, just, like, I may as well just break the stories then. Like, like anyone can do it.
Gift, Nick. That's Jamie McLaren's facial hair, and you damn well know that.
Yeah, well, I'm the second coming of that, okay? But anyways, what I was saying is, like,
calm down, Seth Rollins.
Okay, sorry about that.
The second Jamie Cummings.
I sold out. I bought in.
You bought in, you didn't sell out.
Yeah, anyway, Joey, I'm tired, man. But anyways, as I was saying, like, we, like, as you said, Joey, we get to a level where we can actually get paid, and we're all in a position between the three of us to get paid to talk about football and write about football. That is not something that you just bestowed on, someone just says, yep, you can come out one day and you can just get paid for your football takes. It takes a lot of hard work to get to that. Run them memes, like, please just stop. I don't want that nickname on me at the moment. But seriously, like, it's, it is almost a bit disrespectful because, again, like, we work hard in our jobs to do all this. And it's not like we just get paid for and just take a paycheck and go, great, we get to talk about football. We get paid. We take that for granted. Like, Joey and I are both freelancers. Like, we don't work. We don't get paid. We can't live. Like, that's the fact. So again, if it's coming from those accounts that are so, you can tell straight away that they're fake. Like, we did a whole thing at uni when you study journalism, by the way, about fact checking and being able to understand what is a real and what is a fake account. And you don't even have to do a journalism course to understand what a fake or a real account is. It just takes literacy and understanding Twitter literacy as well. And
I think it just takes time. Like, it just takes
but also you can tell straight away. Like, it's not hard. And then when you have someone like with Louis Laurie Latanzio a few weeks ago coming out and responding and saying, what do you mean? Oh, that's news to me that I've been linked to Perth Glory. And then he goes and signs in Canada. Like, how do you know more than what Louis Laurie Latanzio does about a potential move unless he's just got an awesome poker face and he's lying, which he wasn't. So I don't know. Like, it irks me. It irks me a lot. So, yeah.
And with these accounts, just remember who gets things wrong, like, and don't just mindlessly retweet something just because it's clicky and fun. If it's like, remember when accounts get things wrong, have a bit of memory, long-term memory. We'll all be better off because you'll be demanding standards of not only these accounts, but also of us. Like, if we get things wrong, or we have wrong analysis, we should be able to defend that or live with the consequences. As I said at the top of the show, I'm going to talk with Arnie tomorrow and take my medicine. I couldn't do that if I was an anonymous Twitter account. So there we go. That's another thing. But I am going to.
It's just quickly, but it's like, we've all copped criticism for things that we've said when we've written stuff. Like how I copped criticism the other day for something I said on the AFL website. Like, I copped criticism just before.
How could you put him in the best, man? He seriously wasn't in the best.
I copped criticism for saying a line about a mistake that happened during the game today. And like, again, it's like, you just have to expect it comes with it. But I'd like to be held to account to it. Like, again, if you disagree with me, that's fine. But like, if I get something wrong, tell me. And I'll learn. Like, we're human after all. Journalists aren't robots and, freaking backstabbers who don't learn and are caught up in their own thing. Like, there are a lot of us who actually are human and good people. We like to think that we can learn from our mistakes.
Wow. I'm something approaching human. I'm with all the chemicals and shit that's in my body at this point. I'm not sure if I'm fully 100% human, but
the Joe bot.
Joey's got the toxins pumping through his veins, and Nick's got the metal teeth. So.
He has got. Joey is the Vision after all. Like, he is technically a cyborg. So he is Paul Bettany.
All right. As I buy time to just add these bits of overlay, we are going to move on to the final segment before we wrap up here. We'll get a few of your questions in, but lower league watch. We got a lot of responses to this, so I didn't want to let people down and get to it. As I said, we broke down the seventh tier of Victorian football last week. And this time around, Stefan wrote in with a question. He wanted us to get to the bottom of why Stanthorpe Carlton United replaced their capybara with a bear in their logo.
Ooh.
And I have these here. So here was the former logo.
That's a cool logo.
So I'll get rid of the lower league watch thing. So there's the capybara, and it was replaced with that, the polar bear.
I can't even, like, can you do it again?
I couldn't see the capybara, Joe.
Yeah. Do it again.
Not for me.
Yeah. Do it again. There's nothing changing on my screen. This is
I've got it now. There we go.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Ah.
I reckon it was the Brazilians lost out in a hostile takeover by the Russians. That's why, or maybe the Alaskans.
Look, to be honest, the Stanthorpe, like the new one with the bear, is very vicious. Like the capybara one is like, it's like wholesome vibes. Like, you know, like the lion.
This is a team in Queensland, we should also say.
But like, I see no issue with the capybara. I like the capybara.
I think it's due to rising global temperatures. That means the polar bear can now thrive in Queensland.
But is that like an intimidation strategy? Do you reckon?
The ice has melted and it's carried him to the coast of Queensland.
I think it's rather more insidious than that. I think there is a third party here that has forced this move from Stanthorpe Carlton United.
You know what? Is it NCIP or
no? So they've gone from the capybara logo to the bear, and look, it's a polar bear. It's a Queensland club that has switched their logo to a polar bear. What is another Queensland brands that has
Bundaberg?
Now, why would a Queensland club all of a sudden switch to a white polar bear?
Sponsorship?
Could there potentially have been something under the table?
Is this a kind of Red Bull Leipzig kind of takeover?
We have seen Red Bull
so we're going to see
clubs, the City Football Group. Could we be seeing sneakily in the lower leagues of Queensland's? Could Bundaberg be making a move? Could we see the Bundy Football Group?
Well, how long until the Bundy Football Group buy the Raw from the Backeries? And we see the...
here we go. Our resident expert
Bundy.
on Queensland.
Have
you received any campaign contributions from either Stanthorpe Carlton United or Bundaberg?
Well, all my campaign contributions come from a completely transparent super PAC, of course. So I can't comment on the sources of those funds. But,
you're an American politician now, Jeff Parrish.
But Bundaberg is an iconic Queensland brand, and I, for one, wholly support their takeover of a local soccer team. They're giving back to the community after what they've done in the sugarcane trade up here. So they've think of all the jobs, all those gerbs.
But what about the capybara jobs that they're taking?
I feel sorry for the capybara. Are you
talking about the capybaras or the Brazilian migrant workers that were brought over here to cut the sugarcane?
Can any of them play football and want to earn marquee wages?
That's one for the federal government to do. That's one for the naturalization committee.
Yeah, okay. I'm a fan of the capybara. But if they're going with the bear and with that logo, you know what they need to have at games, and they're going to go right out with it. They should have that same like logo, but just like a big plastic polar bear that's like stands right next to the pitch, like this. Like you see, they got the hands, and it just stands, and like they see this big polar bear when they walk out, and it's like it's the intimidation factor. It's all mind games. So Nick Stoll's like possessing me at the moment through mind control. I feel like I'm talking more like him with every passing day. But yeah, basically, I want a big polar bear at games. If you're getting rid of the capybara, like a big plastic polar bear that just stands out, like the ones you see.
Like
at those
what
pubs.
the Chicago Bears have at their games, but
yeah, basically.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the other one, we had a comment, and this will be the last one, genuinely, before we wrap the show up. Matt Galea, friend of the show, leaving a comment, wanted to get our thoughts on the promotion race in the Men's State League 1 Northwest League here in Victoria. So Caroline Springs out in front, 4 points clear in top. 2 teams, however, will earn promotion from the state leagues into the NPL. And just look at that. Second place, Sydenham Park on 30. Third, Essendon Royals, 29. Fourth, Banyul, 29. Fifth, Brimbank, 28. So second through fifth separated by 2 points. Nick Nabano, who's going up?
Just a quick thing. Remember, this one team from each of the state leagues, because it's one from the Northwest, one from the Southeast. So for those at home who are playing along, it's not 2 from 2. The team to go up right now, Caroline Springs, the Georgies, it'd be good to see the Georgies back in the NPL, fellas. Like, we want to see as a fellow Maltese, like I want to see them in the top tier. But
Italian.
As a fellow Pastizzi.
Yeah, No, I'm not a food, Josh. I'm not a
I
pasticcio.
know. I feel like
okay?
that should be a colloquial term for you lot, though.
For you lot. Oh, he's gone full Queensland politician.
You racist. I'm saying I'm gonna go the Georgies. I reckon they get promoted.
Josh?
I'm gonna go for my my boys at Sydenham Park. And I'm not just talking about Macedonians. Jay Davies playing in the middle of the park over at Sydenham, and Brad Blumenthal up front, absolutely smashing it at the moment. So they've been pretty good mid-season signings.
Can I just say one thing before we go, guys? Just we're going to talk lower league. So technically, it's a lower league, even though it's like it should be our second division. This Saturday, if people are watching at home at 6:45, just as a bit of an update, 'cause we spoke about this situation about what's going on with the 2021 NPL Victoria Championship and how Avondale took it to the Supreme Court to basically get the championship handed to them. Now, if you haven't been playing along at home, Avondale are now second, and Oakley plays South Melbourne this Saturday. And if Oakley get a point on Saturday at Lakeside, Oakley are crowned 2021 NPL Victoria champions or premiers. So keep an eye on that if you guys are playing along at home. You want something to watch on Saturday? Oakley versus South Melbourne. Also has a lot on the line for the 2022 finals series. So, and also, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, shout out to South Melbourne for the banner yesterday. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, we did mention that earlier.
Okay, but I had to say my bit as well. So thank you, South Melbourne.
Indeed, you did say your bit, Nick DeBarno, cutting me off before I could give my prediction for the
Sorry,
State
Joey,
League
you give your prediction now.
I'll go with Essendon purely because they're a talent factory. So many great men's players have come out of that program. A lot of great women's players have come out of that football factory as well. So I'll be tipping Essendon to come up with that
Joey,
one.
Have you been spending time in the AFL media now talking about football factories? Like, it sounds like you've been watching a bit of AFL recently.
I'm going for Essendon.
The Essendon Football Factory.
I thought that was like private schools and shit.
No, that's the Geelong Football Factory is the famous colloquialism because Geelong is like, well, that's part of their private school program.
We got to wrap this up.
We are wrapping this up right now. We have gone 2 hours and 30 minutes, but I made no promises. And I let the show breathe its natural course because I am the best host. But now it is time. We all need to go to bed. I have to see my hematologist at like 8:30 in the morning tomorrow, so I need to go to sleep. But Barnaby Josh, in your what hat is? What's the actual name for that hat?
I haven't named it, but
no, what's the style, you moron?
I don't know. It's not really an akubra. It's sort of a I don't know. I don't know what's called, Joey.
Big hat. The big hat.
It's just a big hat.
You and your big hat. Thank you very much for joining us, Josh Parrish. Nick DeBarno from the famous I'm Upset Studios. Thank you very much for joining us as well.
I need to drive home now, and I'm so tired.
Everybody,
hopefully you'll drive past a Man United Melbourne Victory billboard on your way.
If I see a billboard, I am going to just like there'll be Freebird playing in my car by Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I'll be gunning. I'll be like, "Get in there, fellas! Get in there!"
I'll be playing Billy Joel. That has been the national curriculum. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the show. The podcast will be up in the coming days, but for now, thanks and success.